Not broadcasting, is recording. I mean, you know.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 14th regular board meeting. I believe it's starting on time. So we'll convene that regular session, and preceding this meeting, we had a short closed session. There were 2 items on that agenda. There's no reportable action from those 2 items. And could we remind ourselves that we are all under one flag in one country, and stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Would one of my colleagues care to move to approve tonight's agenda, please?
Move to approve the agenda as presented. Second.
Got a motion by Quinn, second by Grace. Roll call vote, please, Christine.
Director Grace?
Aye.
Director Jensen?
Aye.
Director Quinn?
Aye.
President Han?
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. Public comment on non-agenda items. Ms. McEwen, please.
Members of the public may address the board on matters not listed on this agenda. The board cannot take action on any item that is not on the agenda. The board or staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed, or may ask questions for clarification. These items may also be referred to staff or scheduled on a future agenda. There will be a separate opportunity for public comment for each item on the agenda. I have 4 speaker cards.
Great.
Fiona Nelson. Where were they?
Where's the other one?
They were out on the.
Oh. Yeah, one.
Don't, if you didn't get a card, don't panic. I'll let you speak even if you didn't get to a card, okay?
So is this microphone on tonight?
Yes, it
We're
is.
very good. BVS is a wonderful community, a great community. One of the best things about BVS is the friendly neighbors. We smile at our neighbors as we go out and about in our community. We go to great lengths to help and support our fellow community members. This is and should remain the predominating culture of BVS, neighborliness and friendliness. The leaders of our community should epitomize this culture and should show the utmost decorum during public meetings. It makes me uncomfortable to have witnessed inappropriate behavior by board members towards staff in public meetings. Public meetings are meant to be a safe and comfortable environment for all. If any board member has concerns about staff, these should be addressed in closed door sessions or in private. Lack of unity between the CSD board and CSD staff can only harm our community. Likewise, dissension between the CSD board and residents will only harm our community. At this moment in time, we are at a pivotal point in the history of our community. The future of our PD and perhaps the entire community hangs in the balance. Feelings are running high, but I would exhort everyone to be civil, appropriate, and respectful, especially at this meeting, and this will make the proceedings much more constructive. If at this meeting the board members do not vote for what we, the residents, have clearly demonstrated that we want, remember we have other options open to us. We, the residents of BVS, can put the PD tax increase on the ballot ourselves without any reference whatsoever to the CSD board. In fact, this might be a much better option because if it is a citizen's effort, we only need to achieve a 50% plus 1 individual vote for the measure to pass, rather than the supermajority necessary if the CSD put it to the ballot. Strenuous efforts have been made by Mr. Jensen to muddy the waters around the PD tax and the CSD general budget. It seems he will stop at nothing to achieve his aims. Mr. Jensen has stated that if the PD tax fails, he will approach the Kern County Local Agency Formation Committee. I can only think of 2 reasons to do this. 1, to try to use them to help disband our PD, or 2, to use them to turn BVS into an unincorporated municipality, which would result in our PD being gone anyway. Friends, neighbours, Bear Valleyans, we may have to fight extremely hard to protect our PD and perhaps even the very existence of our BVS community as we know and love it. Actions speak louder than words, and how the CSD board members vote at this meeting, now, here, this evening, will definitively determine how voting residents view them. If anyone votes not to put the PD tax on the ballot, that will really tell against them. People will show how they are and what they really believe in and what they're going to do for this community. And it's this community that is important, not what individuals want for themselves. So, how are the CSD members going to vote tonight to pass the budget, to put the PD tax on the ballot? Will they be our heroes? I, for one, certainly hope so.
Next card.
Lori Carlin.
I'm gonna read the whole thing, so I'm sorry. Good evening. Lost my notes. I'm Maury Carlin. I've been a property owner in Bear Valley since 2011 and a part-time employee at the CSD in the billing department since June 2013, which as of Monday, I'm no longer an employee. During that time, I've seen many changes, some good and some not so good. I was here when we had to close our post office and our on-site dispatch department when the voters rejected Measure G in June of 2016. It was very hard to see my coworkers, some even friends, lose their jobs. I have worked with 4 temporary general managers and then with a general manager that abused his authority by stealing from the district. Only when Bill Melanin was hired did we see hope for the district and for the employees and the residents. There were times before Mr. Melanin that staff was on their own, doing their own jobs without direction from upper management because our previous general manager failed to fill supervisory positions. They did their jobs because of their dedication to the district. Many employees have been here for 5 years or more because they love working for the CSD. Some even live here as I do. It's very hurtful to read on social media the mean words that people are saying about them, like they're uneducated, overpaid, lazy, stupid, dumb, blind, and more. It's so wrong. They deserve respect. The same respect that they give those in the valley when they do their job. Some of the same people saying those remarks on social media are the same ones that want to disband or defund the police department and our gate staff. Most of us know how damaging that could be. We are very lucky to have recently hired a dedicated, motivated, and community-oriented chief of police in Bear Valley, who's now also a resident. I see many great things to come with his leadership, and I'm excited for the community. Please vote today to put the tax option on the November ballot, allowing the registered voters their choice to choose an option regarding an increase in the police tax. We should all have the right to choose. In closing, I would like now to address the nastiness of attacking current and past board members, and tonight I speak regarding my husband, Jay Carlin. Most of you don't know that he served on every CSD committee since moving here. He's been a VIPS volunteer for 10 years, 7 of them as the captain. He has been awarded the Gold Presidential Volunteer Award numerous times for volunteering over 500 hours in that year alone. He served as the board president twice, and he always felt that he put the district first. He made many difficult decisions and in no way benefited from any of them. During the last election, he put his name on the ballot, but with COVID restrictions, he chose not to campaign in public due to COVID restrictions. Though he did not win, he still attended each board meeting via Zoom. He was elected back on the board after the resignation of another board member and was happy to serve again, but some felt he didn't deserve it. During his service on the board, he couldn't change what had been neglected or what wasn't managed correctly in the past, but he worked his hardest to see that the district moved forward in a positive way, and I and many others appreciate his dedication. Though we'd be moving to Florida next week, a decision my husband made so that I could be with my aging parents, both 92 years old and a father in end-stage dementia, we still remain homeowners here and will continue to support our beautiful community, the employees of Bear Valley Springs, a beautiful place that we've called home for 11 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Next card.
Perla Victor.
Good evening, Mr. President and Board of Directors. I have been in the workforce for over 35 years, and I can honestly say that I'm very proud and feel honored to work with such great and awesome colleagues. We are here in unity to voice our concerns. We, the employees of Bear Valley Community Services District, have a proclamation of employment. First most, we as employees within the state of California, in accordance with the Department of Industrial Relations Labor Commissioner's Office, employees do not need to be in a union to be represented or have employees' rights. The Labor Enforcement Task Force will step in to represent us should the reason arises. Secondly, regarding our gate staff, are you aware that your actions to remove the gate staff and replace them with security guards will affect 14 employees? 14 employees that range anywhere from 1 to 30 years experience working within the community. Most of them are residents for this community. May I remind you that by taking this action and hiring security guards, you will lose personal touch. If you are willing to spend $100,000 more to pay for security guards, why are you not willing to use those funds to promote education? Direct the general manager to educate and train our gate staff to become more proficient guards and satisfy your requisites. We employees, as specified in the labor law under the Labor Commissioner's Office, we have the right to demand job security. We have the right to work in a safe and healthy workplace. We have the right to not be retaliated against. We have the right to not be harassed. We have the right to work in a non-hostile environment. We have the right to protect ourselves from defamation of character in the workplace. I highly recommend the board of directors to research libel versus slander, as we are asking for this behavior to stop. Additional, you do not get to determine our worth and give us a COLA increase based on your opinion of worth. In accordance to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, government employers use a COLA percentage figure by the state or federal government that is tied to the consumer index. As adopted and approved by the Board of Directors on August 27, 2015, under the section of Human Resources, it specifies, in subsequent fiscal years, the annual cost of living allowances based upon the consumer price index should ensure salaries remain current and relevant. This will also improve organized labor relations, as there should no longer be the need to negotiate large salaries increases every few years, as salaries will keep pace with the regional market. For fiscal years 2016-17, the board approved and adopted the budget dated August 25th, 2016. Under the section Human Resources, it specifies last year classifications and compensation study was completed and salaries were adjusted for local market. Therefore, this year, only the annual cost of living allowance based upon the consumer price index was necessary to ensure salaries remain current and relevant. The CPI is derived from LA, Riverside, Orange County, all urban wage earners, and clerical workers year-end March. For fiscal year 15-16, this treatment to the COLA has been applied and should continue to be applied in order to maintain overall best practice. I would like to remind the board of directors, merits are no longer given after an employee reaches 5 years of employment. The only increase afforded to them is through COLA. Thank you.
Deputy Andrade?
Thank you.
Good move.
I'm putting a little more because I feel like I'm right on you. Can you hear me?
No. Point the mic towards you.
Okay, do I have to be on top of that?
That's better.
Okay, I'm gonna continue on. Lastly, government hierarchy works as follows. The residents within the community voted for you, the board of directors, hence the residents within the community to get voice their upsets, opinions, and complaint to you. The board of directors will determine how to proceed and meet with your general manager. The general manager will then direct his staff to move forward. Unless it is of the regular business complaints, our residents should not be voicing their upset opinions and complaints directly to our employees. This causes and creates dysfunction within our workplace. Under the district code 223, general manager powers and duties, the general manager shall be responsible for operating the district in accordance with the budget and for the efficient administration for all the affairs of the district which are under his control. The general manager shall have the following powers and duties: to implement policies established by the board of directors and enforce all rules and regulations of the district. To control and order, give direction to the subordinate officers and employees of the district under his jurisdiction. To recommend to the board of the directors adoption of such measures, ordinance and resolutions as he deems necessary. To ensure the health and safety of the district property, personnel, customers with respect in district operations. To ensure that the customers' inquiries, requests, and complaints are dealt with appropriately. To establish and improve training requirements of the activities for district employees. To conclude, it's up to the board of directors to move forward in promoting best practices. For we, the employees of Bear Valley Community Service District, will stand united as these said topics. Thank you for listening.
I have no more cards.
Right, this is, okay, it's non-agenda items to remember.
I know. Excuse me, please. Sure. Thank you. I wanna leave the sign behind. Okay.
My name is Debbie Statland, and I want to speak to the fact that I've had to stop coming to these meetings because my health is a little bit fragile, and I'm really sick and tired of having to listen to Charles Jensen talk disrespectfully, not only to Bill, but to other board members that he calls the good old boys, to Terry, to Greg. Even at times, he said things when Jay was still here about how he wasn't properly elected and that he was just slipped into the seat because somebody else wasn't here. That's not okay. It's also not okay the way that things were done during the election when Charles got on the board, when Kevin Rice was treating Kathy Kinnear disrespectfully and putting bloody things out on the entryway because he used our election rules against us, and he plans to do that during the November election to help fill the 3 empty seats with Charles' sympathetic people so that he can get control of this board. I'm here tonight to ask you directly, Charles. We would like to have you turn in a letter of resignation instead of trying to pack this board with stupid people like you. Because you are not qualified for a board of directors seat. You attack people, you attack everything going on, including the way the chief of police is handling the speeders now. You don't understand how to do things in normal environments. You were a CHP officer. You were taken off the freeways and the streets and put into a desk job. We don't have to go through your bullshit forever. Please do us a favor. Resign from the board and let us properly run this place. Thank you all.
Yes. Behind, yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Dr. Susan Hawley. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. And when I first drove through Bear Valley almost 20 years ago to bring somebody's horse to a show, I fell in love as soon as I went through the gate. And I've been here 4.5 years. I have my office now in Tehachapi. And I feel a little like I'm off topic. So I'm just gonna make a comment and hope that it gets considered in all this. I came to share that I hope that the board is requesting a written request grant from the federal infrastructure bill for rural areas, so that we might get one of the grant monies that are available since the new infrastructure bill just passed in Washington. Thank you.
Other comment, additional? Okay. All right. I'm sorry, I didn't see you, please come in.
Things are a little full out there. My name's Kevin Mayer. I've been a property owner up here since towards the end of 2014, moving here full-time in 2016. I'd like to just read a very short little excerpt from an interview with Donnie Youngblood that was taken from the LA Times that was published on 7/8/22. And there's nothing really, it's not direct quotes, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It is, the Kern County Sheriff's Department lifer said that his team is severely understaffed at a time when they can't afford to be. Last year he asked school districts where his deputies had an on-campus presence to cancel their contracts because he needed to reassign them. Some of his substations can't offer 24-hour coverage to the tiny communities they serve in a sprawling county. What this basically means is that if we were to eliminate the police department and go to the Kern County Sheriff's Department for coverage, we aren't going to have any. I think it would be a real mistake, and I certainly urge you to put the ballot measure on the ballot. Thank you.
No public comment? Anybody else in the hallway? We're good? Okay. Thanks, everyone. Right. With that, the public comment. Consent calendar, Ms. McEwen.
Consent items are considered routine and are intended to be acted upon in one motion without discussion. During this portion of the meeting, the consent calendar will be read aloud. Prior to approval, the president will give the board, staff, and public the opportunity to pull any item for discussion. The remaining calendar will be acted upon. Any pulled items will then be heard and acted upon individually. A, approve minutes of the June 2nd, 2022 special board meeting. B, approve minutes of the June 9th, 2022 regular board meeting. C, approve minutes of the June 30th, 2022 special board meeting. D, accept June 2022 committee report. E, accept the monthly investment report as of May 31, 2022. C, accept register of warrants for June 2022. G, approve CAL FIRE grant audit report.
Thank you, Ms. McEwen. Members of staff wish to pull any items? Members of the public wish to pull any items? Members of the board wish to pull any items?
I have one.
Go ahead.
The June liaison committee report, I didn't see any mention in there regarding the issues with the agronomic surveys from the BVSA.
Yeah.
That would be the July meeting that was discussed.
Okay, thank you, that's it.
Anything else?
No.
Nothing to pull? All right, can we have a motion to approve our consent calendar items, please?
Motion to approve? Second.
Motion by Grace, second by Jensen. Roll call vote, please. Ms. McEwen.
Director Grace?
Aye.
Director Jensen?
Aye.
Director Quinn?
Aye.
President Han?
Aye, motion carries 4-0. Consent calendar is approved. Item 10, disclosures by board of directors. Back to Ms. McEwen and
Board members are asked to disclose any outside communications with individuals and organizations that have an action item on this agenda that pertains directly to them or their specific personal or private interests, and which communication is not included or disclosed in the agenda package, so that all interested persons have an equal opportunity to express and represent their interests.
Mr. Quinn?
No.
Mr. Grace?
No.
Mr. Jensen?
None.
And none from me. Thank you, everybody. Action items: A, adopt resolution 22/23-01 approving the final budget for fiscal year 22-23. This is a public hearing item, and at this time I will reconvene the public hearing that we opened during budget study session number 2.
Mr. President, if you could indulge me, could you please admonish against any use of profanity or insults? We had a long soliloquy at the beginning about civility and the way we treat each other, and I appreciate it if you could maintain that consistency.
I agree with Mr. Grace here. Let's keep our decorum under control. Okay?
I appreciate that, thank
Yes,
you.
sir. So I will reconvene the public hearing from that second meeting. So, Mr. Mallon, I saw your hand, but we're gonna stay in order here. Mr. Mallon.
Mr. President, members of the board, at your June 30th meeting, you continued your public hearing to afford an opportunity for citizens to review that version of the budget that we had put out that week. So with the continued hearing, I don't know, Mr. President, members of the board, we've included all of the materials in the packet. There are what I think are some positive highlights about the budget, most of which I would say is relatable to the enterprise funds, which for some years were in some dire condition financially, and as a result of the approved rate adjustments, they are now sustainable, stable, not needing general fund subsidies to keep going. And I think that is significant. The overall budget, we balance, we utilize, as part of our policy indicates, some of our reserves for capital outlay, particularly in the general fund. We've included a number of things to improve services. One of those is the audiovisual system here in our board chambers, which even at that meeting was not functioning. So we had already included that, so we're hopefully going to be able to see that. There had not been at that point any particular questions of the board. I know I've received one relative to the investment in the parking lot here at administration, and there had been a question from the audience about that. Wondering about the value of that versus making some improvements at the gate. The roadway there deteriorated. And so that was a suggestion. What I'd like to share with you relative to that is we have had the opportunity, Mr. Haggard in our roads division took a look at the gate area. He's estimating it at about $5,500 to $6,000 because we can do it with our own equipment. Here is his work. So I'm thankful for that, Daniel. We had included approximately $20,000 for the kind of resealing of this parking area, really kind of fill in the cracks, give it a good seal, paint some new lines on it, just kind of spruce it up, if you will. My point is if the board's interested in doing something, I believe you can do both. We've got $35,000 budgeted for road materials. Appropriately, that could be used at the gate. I would envision we're just gonna smooth it out because as we continue to develop a gate reconfiguration of the area, it might get blown out here in the next year or two. But I do want to answer that because the director had asked that of me. Beyond that, we've had the opportunity to continue to revisit the budget, and particularly there had been a question about COLAs and the budget, and I believe we've provided the explanation of the difference between an 8.5% and a 6.7 or whatever the point was. We've pulled the CAL FIRE grant out. So part of what that did do was reduce the expenses in salaries and benefits because we would receive money from the state as part of that grant to offset our internal costs of administration and so forth. We don't yet have the contract. It'll be here in another 2 months, I think. And so we've pulled that out, and consequently the budget has changed, but it's really non-substantive, and in fact it went down. We found a couple of, like we call them, hidden cells, and it wasn't significant, but as an example of the effort we've continued to make. It is now a $12,205,154, and I believe Ms. McEwen has the resolutions that would represent that. If there were no other changes, that's what we would recommend. So with that, I'll answer questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. Continuing on with our public hearing, is there comments from the public on item A, the budget? Yes, please.
First and foremost, Judith Cagle. I want to thank the staff for the reworking of -02, the new, okay, this is the one that has the new COLA. If you've looked at the package, I'm sure you've seen it. Extremely clear, extremely well specified, well documented. And I think, you know, basically if we'd had some of that clarity the very first time, you guys wouldn't have had to do so much work. But this is beautiful work, so thank you for doing that. First question that I have has to do with adopt resolution, the one we're listening to, 22-2301, approving the final budget. Since 02 has to do with COLA, if we go with the approval of the budget as it now stands with the 8.5, does that mean that the budget will be reworked? I think there was some verbiage in 02 that stated it would be, such that those numbers would reflect the COLA and perhaps the individual stipend that would be given to non-management people. It seems to me the inverse. It seems that you should be deciding your COLA, and then you would have the basis for which to finalize the others. So that would have been my question I'd like to have answered at that point. And I didn't bring this up at the time during general because I thought the audio visual was a part of this budget. But has it ever been questioned why we can't work with the BVSA who has a larger location that they use for their meetings, and their audiovisual works. Can we not do some sort of a liaison work such that we don't have members of the community looking like, puppies that wanna be adopted? It's very odd. We certainly have more room. And if we're gonna look at spending $33,000 to upgrade this, it still doesn't give us seating capacity. So I would ask to bring that up. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Ms. Cagle. For the maybe 7 years I've been coming to the meetings, this is the second fullest I've seen the room, and then generally there's 3 or 4 people out there. But I hear your point, it's a valid point. More public, did you have an answer to that question?
I do, Mr. President, members of the board. I do think the order is all right. And I explain that by saying there is, within the budget, adequate funding for whatever, I believe, COLA option you select. We don't need to then change the budget. We typically do come back with the budget adjustments later in the year, and we can tweak those. But I don't think that it requires you to amend the budget, because what you'll end up doing is approving of the salary ranges, that whole salary schedule. That's what we run off of. So the money will just have been budgeted there, then get spent, because you've already provided the guidelines for salary and wage adjustments. So I understand the point, but it isn't necessary to change the whole budget now. And I would prefer if you move forward and we can get it approved. And whatever the COLA is, it should be able to be funded from what we have. So I hope that helps.
Ms. Cagle, do you have something to add?
May I ask one clarifying? Is there any budget for merit increases this year, or is all increase based on COLA?
Within our salary schedules and our personnel regulations, employees are eligible to have merit adjustments upon satisfactory performances, and that would adjust them from their existing step, and I believe there are 7? 6. To the next level up. When they get to that 6th level, then their only adjustment might be the COLA. So currently, all of the calculations going into these budget numbers reflect an individual employee's position in their salary schedule with the date that they would adjust upon satisfactory performance and all the numbers that go with it.
Thank you. More public comment on item A, our budget, in our public hearing. Jiva, Ms. Freeberg.
Okay, hello, thank you very much, I appreciate it. I got to speak with Bill the other day, and I brought up other numbers and things that I've seen. And, so he's saying that the budget will be amended with a new COLA. So does that mean that things that are still in error or possible typos or something will be amended at that later date? Or are they gonna be amended at some time here? Like, we still have an error on page 23 with the total, the delta in expenditures. As I went through here, let's see what my notes are. The district-wide insurance, I went over that with Bill, he caught me on one of my line items there, and then so I fixed it and I went back, and the question was 72.48% insurance increase. And so the question we all had is, what was it, you know, what drove it? Bill spoke to me about some of that, but I didn't see the policy, so I don't know how that was driven. But when I did the numbers and I went through all the pages and pulled out where the policy insurance was indicated, I got a 53%. So, you know, I know everybody's working hard, but there needs to be accuracy or clarification. And if it's really 72%, which it probably is, then it's missing, the number is missing somewhere in these data sheets that I should be able to figure out. So that was a question I had there. And so with the page 31, let's see what that one is. That's the PD cost. And, so the percent for the columns was dropped, that was another thing, the district-wide one, the column was dropped for the percentage. And we wanted the columns in all the rest of them, so it would be much easier to see what was going on. And hope that will be added into this budget. But again, will that be until it's amended? So I don't know about that. Then we spoke before about, the overhead allocations for the services for the gate and PD, and how that didn't seem representative correctly and balanced to remove it from the PD only and the gate, but not the other funds that are non-enterprise funds, because we look for consistency across the board there. And when you do that, what you're pulling out is $248,000 from the actual PD costs, and we can disagree on that or not, if it's done that way, and $223,000 out of the gate costs. And if we're gonna do it that way and pull it, put it back in general funds, we should do the same for the road and the other non-enterprise. So that was my comment there. Then I went and looked and tried to figure out this 8.5% COLA. And when I went and added up everything that was here, the district, the admin, police, gate, services, general services, water, wastewater, parks, rec, road, solid waste, I ended up with over 8% for some of them, and some of them over 9%. So I couldn't figure out how we came up with the 8.5% COLA, even though the new spreadsheets for the salaries, steps, and levels of 12 and the 7 steps is 8%. So I'm not sure how it doesn't match in the counting here. So that's my question. Thank you.
Everything?
Mr. President, members of the board, for some background, I did call the Special District Risk Management Association, which is the pool that handles our insurance for property, general liability, as well as workers' compensation. And they had indicated that insurances have gone up all over.
Yeah.
Wildfires are a factor. Costs increasing, a factor, and particularly some of their, I'll call it umbrella insurances, those are going up significantly, 25% or somewhere there, 15 to 20.
Yep.
So as a few explanations that I could get as to why it had gone up, as we were talking, we were not having had huge losses or something to have to contribute towards. So it seems to be a function of the time, or times, and some of those aspects that may be unique to California, i.e. wildfires. So that's what I heard, and we can certainly attack this during the course of this year. We really don't have time to undo it, in my opinion. But if you wish, we could look elsewhere and or open it up for quotes and see what happens. So there usually is a time frame somewhere towards late spring, I think, when you have to give them an indication if you wish to withdraw from the pool.
Oh, yes, Stephen?
Thank you, Bill, for that clarification. I know you also mentioned the CDC gun range, that we have something to do with using it at the prison, I think. Did you get any clarification on that? And, because my question was, why would we have something like that with the, so I didn't know, I just wondered if you got any clarification.
So part of what I shared with Ms. Freebird was, one of the items of change was we had a couple of additional certificates of insurance where we named someone as an additional insured. And one of those was the CDC, and it was itemized for gun range use. So I'm not familiar with us having used it, but apparently if we were, they were looking to get a certificate of insurance from us. We can cancel those if we wish to. There is a cost, but there's no change on the premium. So if we wanna revisit all of those, we certainly can, and roll that into, a renewal next year, so.
Public hearing, budget items. Ms. Cooper.
Do you think, Bill, if we became a fire-wise community, that would help us with the CSD budget too, as far as getting the insurance down? It'll take about 2 years of hard work. We need 75% of the community involved, but, so far they're getting more insurance companies coming back into areas. The costs come down and everyone else is better off too, so I thought I'd bring that up.
Mr. President, and I appreciate that. I would hope it could help. And if we continue to be engaged with the Fire Safe Council and fire-wise communities and do that with our residents, maybe it helps us as well. So I don't know that it definitively does, but certainly worth continuing to pursue those things and make us safer all around.
Thank you. Public hearing items, budget. Directors, Ms. Grace.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I had asked Bill to look at the gate. I appreciate that, and I appreciate him working to factor that in. I think it's only fair if the CSD is gonna get a new fog seal, that the, damage, especially at the outbound, is addressed. And I'm glad we can do both, so I appreciate that consideration. I did have one question on the AV equipment. Before we started, the president asked the question, are we broadcasting? And I'm wondering, does the new AV equipment allow us to not only record meetings, but broadcast out to the public?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good. One thing we're all in agreement about, great. Okay, those are all my questions, sir.
Mr. Johnson.
Just getting back to the insurance, so it was the CDC gun range, I was under the impression we had some sort of rider for having CDC, basically prison labor, come and work in the valley.
That wasn't what I had read in the certificate, so it does identify specifically what the certificate is for. This one mentioned gun range.
Okay. And then were you able to get a cost comparison between having 2 full-time gate people versus however many corresponding part-timers that it would take?
And I don't remember that specifically, Mr. Jensen. However, the addition of the 2 full-time and the reduction of 7 of those 14 part-timers, we certainly would have an increase. I'm of the opinion it is worth the investment, if you will, into the personnel at the gate to improve what we do in a number of different ways. And we talked briefly, I think, at the last workshop about turnover. I do think that history showed that when they were full-time, they were committed and dedicated, and they had much longer tenures. And so they for years had run it with 3 full-time and then backfilled part-time. And that, what I call the experiment, a few years back, I don't believe worked well. And so that's why we've got it. There is some additional costs. They are included in the budget. It is funded. So I don't know that answers your question specifically about a cost difference in a dollars and cents, but we are able to fund it.
My concern is just that it ends up representing basically an expense of more than $25,000, which would require a separate approval for.
Well, the approval really is included in your budget documentation. So part of the documents are the board approving of the personnel allocations, and we identify them by position and department. And so when that, as a part of your budget, is approved, that is effectively the authorization.
Mr. President, that approving the personnel allocation is part of your next agenda item, 11B.
But also part of the budget too, so. I don't have anything else.
Mr. Quinn?
I have nothing, thank you.
I hope we can get this budget passed today. All right, so I forgot to note the time when I reconvened, but I hope you did. So at 18:45, we will close the public hearing for 22-23 budget.
Mr. President, I'm sorry to keep interrupting. One thing also I had asked Bill is for a report back on status of the repair at the gate. So I know our next meeting is more than likely in September. If we just could get, it's entirely feasible it will be done by that time, so if we could just get a report back.
I can refer and defer to Mr. Haggard. As I recall, it is probably a couple of months out.
Okay.
So, and I think the time to
I just
do that
appreciate
work-
some follow-up so it doesn't get
Sure,
lost.
certainly, and I, frankly, I think we're excited to be able to get that done as well.
That's awesome. Okay. Thank you for your indulgence.
Gentlemen, do we have a motion to approve this budget?
Mr. President, I move the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 22/23-01, approving the final budget for fiscal year 2022/23.
Second.
Motion by Quinn, second by Grace. Roll call vote, please.
Director Grace?
Aye.
Director Jensen?
Aye.
Director Quinn?
Aye.
President Hunt?
Aye. Woo-hoo, motion carries 4-0. Item Bravo, adopt resolution 22-23-02, approving the personnel allocation full-time salary scale and part-time salary scale and cost of living adjustment for fiscal year 22-23. Before I turn it over to Mr. Malinan, this is something that the board had pulled separate from the budget so that we could discuss it on its own. Take it away, Mr. Malinan.
Mr. President, members of the board, we hopefully have addressed, and I was not able to attend the meeting, I think when you had provided some direction. So, the question of the cost of living adjustment for employees, the memorandum that we've included hopefully satisfies the request for some comparable or nearby communities and what are they doing, and I think even since that, was that the June 9th meeting or so, maybe even the June 2nd, we've gotten some updated numbers. So we've tried to represent the region around us and the agencies like us, governmental, and we included the Social Security. And then my understanding was that the board had inquired about some sort of a tier approach, and what we are providing you with, I hope, satisfies that, which is to, and the board is free to select what they wish. You know what we budgeted, so as an upper end of sorts, a baseline COLA, and then there is a one-time bonus or recognition that would go to employees, and we've explicitly excluded management, which includes myself, Ms. McEwen, and Chief Suttles. So we've shown what the budgeted amount is, and from various options, and again, somewhere within those parameters, if you make a decision, we certainly will be able to afford it, if you will. It's funded because you have the full COLA in here. So we've given you some level of savings, hopefully enough background information for you to have a discussion and hopefully make a decision. So we'll stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. Comments from the public on item B? Yes, Ms. Cable.
We should just have a rotating chair. Couple of quick questions on the proposed fiscal salaries. Thank you again for doing multiple levels at various levels of COLA. If I understand that correctly now, these numbers have been adjusted, the steps have been adjusted by the 6% opening up the windows, correct? So you had what they currently are, and so the 6% COLA example would be each of the steps going 6% out? No?
No, that has to do with the levels of people going up in their employment merit raises. that was, the COLAs are different
Ms.
levels.
Staff,
Yeah,
it
no,
looks
I
like- let's
understand
let
that,
staff
but I
respond to the
thought that
staff.
you said that you established, if I understood it correctly, you said that the COLAs would be, the tiers were adjusted. How were they adjusted?
Did you want me to answer now, or do you wanna go ahead?
Okay.
Do you have one?
Yeah, and then the other one is just simply, and this is dumb on my part, so you can laugh at me after the meeting.
Sorry.
The very last, staffing level that we have is assistant general manager. We don't have a general manager? Bill, who are you? Aren't you the general manager?
Yes, and we used to have an assistant general manager, we don't have one any longer.
So is that the same?
I'm not on a salary schedule.
Okay, that clears that up, thank you. So, yes, would you please?
Okay, regarding the different salary scales that were included in the package, what we did was adjusted the first, well, let me bring one up. We adjusted the beginning, by whatever percentage. So, gate pass coordinator scale, 1A was adjusted up 6%. And then that flowed through the full salary scale. The difference between the steps, the merit steps, is 5%. So it doesn't go, those steps don't change.
Okay,
Just
so the A column was adjusted by whatever COLA was going to be elected.
Yes.
Okay, and I think you explained the terminology, Perla, I'm not sure. How do we assess that our ranges are appropriate against all other companies? I come from a corporate world and there are databases that everybody, verbally vomits into all their pay scale data from companies. And it gives us, so that we know that our secretary two is being compensated appropriately as other secretary twos.
Mr. President, let me answer that, please.
Oh, thank you.
I think what Ms. Victor referred to was a classification and compensation study that the district must have done, I didn't know the year.
15-16.
All right, so 6 years ago. Experience-wise, they should be 5-year intervals. And the intent is that in fact you make comparisons between your positions and the tasks and the responsibilities and so on. And you compare them with like positions in other agencies, similar work. And you'll typically create some benchmarks. A police officer, my experience has been one of those that is a police officer here, is a police officer there. Their duties are pretty much standardized. So, and you can do some kind of internal interpolation with the other positions within your organization. And then you also have to do some external comparisons, i.e. the marketplace. And you can do certainly localized, and then you may wish to, depending on the organization, may wish to do some more regional as well. So in order to really get a good grasp, I would suggest that a classification compensation study is the tool by which you should have some comfort that that salary schedule is fairly accurate. And then on an annual basis, you make adjustments and things, but that's the tool. That's kind of how it works. Typically done by an outside consultant who has expertise in human resources, labor relations, and compensation studies. So.
Perfect, so if I understand correctly, it's been about 6 years since we've done that. So I would think that you may wanna look to do that to ensure that we are, in fact, having the correct ranges, be they understated or inflated by simply increasing in percentages. So, excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Public comment, item B. Ms. Krieger?
Thank you, Mr. President. Back to the COLAs. Okay, page 95, the one we're just talking to that was up here. When you propose the 0% COLA of $5,517,713 for salary and benefits, and I go back to page 31 of the district-wide, those numbers don't match. I would thought if our zero baseline would have been based upon the baseline that was budgeted last year. So by the fact that it doesn't match, it's already adding some percentage to that 8.5% COLA. So when I went through numbers, the admin didn't come out right at all, some of it, but others it was 8.7, 8.25, 8.7, 9.3, 9.6, and so things that I'm wondering about. But then when you added the offset of the zero, that's on the one page versus the zero baseline here, it went as high as for admin 11.9%, others are 8.75, and 9 again. So I'm just having problems following this, and I think it needs to be addressed, that it's much more clear for those of us that like to see that it's too easy to make a mistake in a cell, you know? And we found some things, and I know Perla's been fixing them, like with PD, the numbers got changed from 25,000 being in one cell versus 197,000, and when they got swapped, it maybe looked like, oh, we're just removing $25,000 of overhead allocation when it was really $197. But there was 3 cells, so I didn't know which one belonged where. So that's what I'm hoping gets corrected, not wait till we get amended as all this is done. So thank you very much.
Public comment, item B. Yes, Mr. Cooper.
I'd like to thank Bill for looking at for this year's, and I also like the other one part where you can give a 4% and give another bonus one time. I think that's a great idea, because we're headed into recession, obviously, as everyone knows now. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
You're welcome. Good work.
Directors, Mr. Grace.
I'd just like to say, I think this is a good solution, and I likewise appreciate Bill's hard work, I appreciate Perla's hard work. I appreciate the comments of Ms. Cagle and others that brought this idea of a tiered system. It's not an easy decision to be up here and understanding that we need to take care of our staff and we need to send the message to them that we value them, while at the same time being fiscally responsible. And again, to Ms. Cooper's point, we're in a recession. We're not about to be in a recession. We've been in a recession. And we'll come to find that out, as we always do, in the next couple of months. But balancing all of those things. And my struggle with the 8%, first of all, it's the number. I have always struggled with the 8%. I've struggled with the fact that it wasn't clear what it was in. It was clear what it was indexed to, but it didn't make sense to index it to the LA number. And also, to be very candid, and Bill and I have talked about this, the fact that it was across the board, that it was to management, it was to miscellaneous, it was to police. And I have a lot of respect for Bill, but I don't, know that it's fair to give management 8% while we're, everybody else is getting the same thing. So that's a debate for another time. But in any event, this is a way, in my opinion, to split the baby 3 ways. We save, I believe it's, just so everybody's clear, the model I'm envisioning is about 6%. I have always said I would support a 3 to 4% COLA. That would be a 3% with a one-time bonus. And again, this is a way to send a message to our staff. We value you, we value what you do. These are hard times for everybody, and we understand that. While at the same time, not having it be across the board. So I think this is a good solution, and I appreciate it. So that's my comment.
You're at 6, being 3 plus 3?
I would say 6, 3 plus 3. That's my vote.
Mr. Jensen?
I would concur with that, except I have one question about the COLAs by neighboring communities. You've got Kern County as 4.55% effective July 1st, 2022. I was under the impression that was 2.5%.
Not according to the ACLU 521.
That's what I just looked up, and it said 2.5%.
Kern County? No,
Yeah.
I have paper trails.
Okay.
That says that.
That's it. Nothing else.
So you're at 6 as a 3 plus 3?
I'll do the 3 plus 3, that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. In all honesty, considering where we are and what we're going to be doing about the economy, which is probably nothing, we're going to look at 8.5 as being nostalgically. That's what we should have done. Not too far down the road, but I can live with 3.3 plus 3, and I hope everybody else can.
Right, so, it is responsible of the district to retain and recruit and hire competent people to do the work that our people need, our residents need to get done. They're deserving of 8.5 and then some, in my opinion. The dedication I see from some of the people in this very room, it's mind-boggling. Middle of the night, snow plowing, fixing trailer tires over there with Joe. These guys really put in a lot. Guys and girls, I meant guys as general, right? Everyone.
People.
People. These people put in a lot of hard work. As of today, the consumer price index is 9.1%. So things probably are going to get worse before they get better. I would like to see this a little higher, but if there's already 3 in support, I don't know that I will be able to get anything done more than that. I'm pleased with this, and keep in mind, if everything goes up 8% and we don't raise salaries 8%, then they took a pay cut. And that's not fair. And when people start to look around and say, oh, well, I could have got 7.5 in Stallion, and we lose wastewater treatment operators or something, for example, then we have a problem recruiting and retaining other people. So I would like to see this higher. Are any of my colleagues amenable to being this a little bit higher?
Mr. President, one thing I would ask, is there a mechanism to revisit this later in the year? If to Mr. Quinn's point, which he's absolutely right, I think we're gonna, 6 months from now, we're gonna look back and I acknowledge that. When I say 8% is too high, it's a fiscal too high. It's not, the real world that we live in. It's a fiscal reality. So I mean, I don't know about being agreeable to make it higher. I would be agreeable to revisit it in 3 to 6 months if things just continue to spiral out of control as it relates to inflation. So I don't know if that is something my colleagues would, as a compromise, would consider.
I think that's a fair point, but as far as the fiscal comment, 8.5% fits into the budget, and it's still $200 and some odd thousand less than last year, lower than last year. So it does fit in the budget.
Mr. President. Mr. President, and just to answer the question of, it sounded like a question, can you? Yes, you can.
It's a can you, and is it how do we? So it's a how do we do it?
Well, it would be an agenda item. I would suggest if you think it's time to revisit it, the board can ask us to bring it forward, and we can bring more information to you at any time that you want us to, and you can make adjustments later. And again, this is perhaps a good reason not to have adjusted or think of adjusting the budget, because it gives you that capability.
I don't normally go back to the public at this point in the meeting, but I will for this important topic. Please come to the podium and make your point.
Can I have that picture back up? If I'm reading this right, the 3 plus 3 saves $115,000 over the budgeted 8.5%. Am I reading that correct? Correct. I would encourage the board, in the scope of a $12 million budget, and for the goodwill towards our employees and the reality of the world we live in, we're quibbling over $115,000 for a staff of how many?
40.
So I'm just asking you, I know we can come back and revisit it, but this was so contentious as it is. I don't think we have it in us to be contentious again. And is that gonna be 3 months? Is that gonna be 6 months? Is that gonna be 9 months? It's $115,000. It's a pittance out of the whole picture, and I encourage you to recognize the employees and move forward as fast as you can.
I think if you're gonna open it up, there's a couple more hands up there.
Ms. Allen, no profanity, please.
There won't be.
In this day and age, what we're facing for that $115,000 difference is the possibility of losing the quality employees that we have, because everybody's fighting to pay right now. Prices of houses, as you know, are soaring. Prices of rent are soaring because people have lost their jobs, lost their paychecks, and therefore are moving out of those apartments. And if they move out voluntarily, the landlord can charge whatever the market will pay. So if they're not getting enough paycheck, then they find out Stallion or anybody else will pay more, they're gonna go. So instead of thinking about giving them a Christmas something because there's still money in the budget, if you're willing to give them a little bit more as recognition of the fact that they're valuable to us, and the fact that unfortunately tempers have flared through all the things that have gone on, and a lot of people have been treated a little rudely, as we've all talked about, maybe we could just give them that little bit of respect instead of making them all go home and go, this really bites. I got better last year and inflation is worse this year. Nobody cares. So let's really give it a thought and think about it, because everybody talks about Bear Valley being full of elitists. Let's not let them say how much we disrespect our employees.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I'm gonna be devil's advocate on this. If I read the percentages of cost of living adjustments for all of the cities that we've listed, 6, 7, 5, 4, 9, 6, we're coming in at 6. We're coming in with our companion cities and addressing it. And while I do agree it's $115,000, and we certainly could spend it, and I would love to do things for our employees, I don't think there's very many people sitting in this room that are getting adjustments this year. We're all making do with what is happening in our economy. So everybody needs to feel the pinch a little. If we are legitimately increasing our people's salaries by what our neighboring CSDs, cities, whatever, are increasing theirs, then we are as competitive, as compassionate as those cities. And then, if we continue to do well on our budget under the direction of Mr. Malinan, who has done an excellent job, there may be more money in the coffers next year to make another thing. But I think we all need to share the burden together. Thank you.
Anybody who knows me knows I'm not very good with figures, but having been the butt severely of a great deal of libel and nastiness and toxicity on social media, I completely understand how the employees of the CSD feel. And I absolutely agree that if it's just a drop in the bucket for our $12 million, we need to pay them this little bit extra for the toxicity and the venom that they have had to deal with day after day after day without being able to defend themselves properly, and they're worth it. All I hear on the news and the radio and everything is that there are jobs open everywhere, that people can ask for more money. We are going to lose these dedicated people for $115,000, if that's what it is. Please show the employees that you're putting your money where your mouths are. You're saying that you appreciate them. Please show them that you really, really do. Let's retain them for one more year. You can look at it again next year, okay? Thank you.
Hello, my name's Donnie. I'm relatively new here, been here about a year. I love the community, I love everything you guys have built through the years. I just wanted to echo what this lovely lady says. Well, I ran sport clips and Subways, and that's how I made my money, and I recently sold them. I've never met an employee who thought they were doing a bad job, ever. And nobody's gonna say that, right? We don't know, I don't know. That's what we are paying this gentleman for, right? To tell us, hey, these guys are doing good. We leave it up to you guys. Everybody's feeling the pinch, but I wanted to put some good news out there, and maybe this will be the first time you hear it. This 9.1% was the CPI numbers for last month. We're experiencing what's called a bullwhip effect because of the paying of people to stay home, basically, cutting the supply. It created this inflation. Copper's coming down, commodities are coming down. 9.1 is going to be the highest. The only thing that's going to cause it to be more is war. If Putin decides to invade another country, oil goes up, I can't control that, nobody can. But we are in a peaking position of inflation. Thank you.
Is that a promise?
Yeah. We'll get that in writing.
I can just tell you what the commodities are doing, they're dropping, everything's coming down.
Order, please.
Kevin American, just real quick to go to Charles Jensen's point of the 2.5% COLA. That was for the retirement plan, that was not for the active employees. They had a contract that they negotiated in 2021 where every tier went up 5% and the max tiers went up 5.4. Thank you.
All right, where's that leave us, gentlemen?
Mr. President, may I, what's not quite being said about all this, the reason for the second page idea of a proposed COLA lower than 8.5%, either 4 or 3, and then a bonus, so to speak, for essentially non-management, was simply an idea to make sure that the top management isn't overpaid. Well, okay, as I said, I'm willing to go with the 3-3. I would like for my colleagues to reconsider and go for the 8.5. Recognizing that in, say when the new board comes in, it'll be about time to look at the economy. Maybe it'll all have flattened out by then. Ha ha ha. The reason prices are dropping is because demand is dropping. That doesn't mean that the cost of living is going to be dropping at all. It's just people will be out of jobs. So once again, I would. Well, I spoke what I spoke.
Who else?
Again, this is not in any way intended to beat up Bill or other management staff. Terry's absolutely right. My reservation has been 8% across the board. Upper management gets the same benefit that miscellaneous does. If there's some way to hate to use the word manipulate, but manipulate the numbers and if management is amenable to the degree they have a choice, I suppose, I would look at that. I mean, but I'm not, I'm not eager to disproportionately have everything be uniform. That's what started this whole discussion, is the fact that we have one number across the board, and we've gotten into different permutations, and it's gotten a little unruly. But in any event, I'd be willing to take a look at that. I absolutely echo Ms. Cagle's comment. Arvin 6%, Tehachapi 6%. We're not doing anything out of line of our peers. That's the danger of indexing it to the city of Los Angeles and the Los Angeles basin, is it's not reasonable, so.
Mr. President, not to muddy the waters, but the distinction between the two approaches of a flat cost of living adjustment and a bifurcated percent here and a lump there is, the lump sum amount that is being used to get to 6 goes away. And so the baseline for our employees the subsequent year is not comparable, if you will, if we had an apple and an apple between here and Stallion or whatever had a 6%. That subsequent year, we will have fallen behind. And so that I think is maybe something for you to consider, because it does have a long-term implication on their earnings and their retirement. So I think that's a potentially significant thing for our people. Mr. President, may I just add this? If you look at that front page of the memo, one of the things that we also included was a 5.5, and I'm not advocating. I'm going to explain it, which is that was the average COLA for the 12 months of 2021. Again, we index March to March, which was, frankly, the highest of those months, if you will. And I hope it's been going down. The 5.5 was an average, and so we included that, and this is the explanation why.
It is motion time. The way I see it is you could do both of these fill in the blanks. You could do just the first one. You could add something at the end to say revisit it at a certain time, but I think it's time for a motion.
Mr. President, if I can muddy the water even further, there is another item to discuss, looking at my notes, which is the gate, which I'd like to, maybe we can divert from the COLA for a minute and talk about something no less easy to solve, but this is the addition of the 2 full-time employees to the gate.
It is part of the budget, I guess. Go ahead.
One of the other things Bill and I have discussed offline, and I made my feelings at the last meeting, well, I thought I'd made them clear, but there were several folks on social media that seemed to muddy the water for their own benefit. But in any event, to editorialize, my reservation about privatization versus keeping the gate as it is versus pulling it further under the police department has been the level of service. And my historic complaints about driving through in the middle of the night with the arm up, no eye contact from the employees. Bill did a tremendous service to explain that a lot of that is probably the part-time employees that we have experienced, and that ideally with full-time employees, we would get a better level of service. What I'm asking for at this point is that we have a good faith effort to discuss those things through the Public Safety Committee. And again, similar to the paving of the gate, I'd like to have it come back to us in a real good faith presentation, not a straw man where, yes, we've discussed it, now let's move on. I have no desire to move on. We need to, things have gotten significantly better since Chief Suttles came on and since we have gotten more full-time folks, but there's still a lot of work to do. I would like to see uniforms, for example. I'd like to see a written protocol on how you treat the public. I'd like to see a written protocol on, the arm should go down at every car, no exceptions. Things like that. A standardization of our gate practices, and that's what I've always been getting at, and seemingly privatization was the best way to accomplish that. If it's not, we still need to talk about it. So I'd like to include something to that effect in the motion, that this would be referred to Public Safety Committee, and that Public Safety Committee would not just discuss it, but they would bring an action plan back to us talking about those things: uniforms, protocols, training for interface with the public, things of that nature. I think it'll make for a better gate. I think it'll make for a better community. It'll make for we all, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's not tongue-in-cheek to me. It is important that we are the premier gated community in Southern California. That's what the poll said, that's what we deserve. As we, 30 minutes from now, we're gonna be talking about how much we pay for public services. We deserve a gate that is better than it has been. So I'd like to include that in any motion that is made, and I would like to include language that says we come back and revisit the COLA. So those are my comments.
Okay. I think it's still motion time.
Who wants to make this one?
Mr. President, I would suggest, however, that although John has made some good points, it seems to me that these items are basically future agenda items rather than resolutions or, part of the process of, we're combining a bunch of things that are potentially combinable but separately addressable. And I'm thinking that, you're gonna be on the board for 2 more years.
I get your point, I guess, in asking Bill, how do I memorialize this? Everybody's widely aware of my challenges with trusting on follow-through and trusting on information. The question is, how do we know this is going to be? We've been asking for it for the last year, and we are where we are. So I'm not sure how else we memorialize and make sure it does come back to us and that action is taken on it. I guess that's my challenge.
Mr. President, I think I suggested a motion memorializes it. So I'll follow up with that piece by suggesting a follow-up motion, Mr. Grace. Once you're done with this particular item, I think it's appropriate and give us 90 days or something like that. And then certainly we'll pick up that baton and run, and we'll bring back that which you're asking for.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, Mr. President, I would move the Board of Directors adopt resolution 22/2302, approving the personnel allocation full-time salary scale and part-time salary scale with a COLA adjustment of 3% and a one-time supplemental pay of 3% for non-management employees for fiscal year 2022-23 to be revisited and reanalyzed with the potential to make further adjustments to the COLA within 90 days.
Second.
I move the Board of Directors adopt resolution 22/23-02 approving the personnel allocation full-time salary scale and part-time salary scale with a COLA adjustment of 8.5%.
How can you do that? You already have it.
I can make a second motion. Is there a second to my motion?
Don't we have to deal with the motion in second before we deal with an additional motion?
We would vote on them in order if they're both seconded.
Over here, second.
Okay, are there any other motions to be made? Roll call vote on Mr. Grace's motion. I have a motion by Grace and a second by Quinn.
Director Grace?
Aye.
Director Jensen?
Aye.
Director Quinn?
Aye.
President Hahn?
No. Motion carries 3-1 with Director Hahn in dissent. Item C, fiscal year 22-23 tax roll items. Mr. Mallon.
Mr. President, and members of the board, not to be confused with subsequent items, these are our annual certifications of our miscellaneous taxes and assessments and taxes for bonds, etc., and standby charges. This is an annual event for us. Effectively, the numbers don't change from year to year. We have to do some certain calculations for the bond numbers, but that's been done, and so we would recommend approval of the attached the resolution.
Great. Public comment on this item. These are pretty dry. Try to stay awake out there. Board comments on this item. Take one at a time. Get your motion on this one. Yes.
Mr. President, I move the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 22/23-03, setting the special tax for gate operations for fiscal year 2022/23 at $75 per parcel.
Second.
Motion by Quinn, second by Grace. Roll call vote.
Director Grace?
Aye.
Director Jensen?
Aye.
Director Quinn?
Aye.
President Han?
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Item 2. Sorry? What
I'm
happened?
sorry, I made a joke. Can we laugh for 10 seconds? Cause it's never been increased.
Yeah, we'd rather increase it, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Next one, Mr.
Mr. President, members of the board, they kind of stand on their own, if you will. I
Very
think
well.
it's appropriate just to keep going through.
Public comment on any of these? Great.
Mr. President, I move the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 22/2304, setting the special tax for police protection services for fiscal year 2022-23 at $80 per parcel.
Second.
Motion by Grace, second by Quinn. Christie.
Director Grace?
Aye.
Director Jensen?
Aye.
Director Quinn?
Aye.
President Han?
Aye, motion carries 4-0. Adopt resolution 22/23-05, setting the road assessment fiscal year 22-23 at $340 per parcel. Public comment, board comment. Is there a motion?
I move the Board of Directors adopt resolution 22/23-06. 05, setting the road assessment for fiscal year 2022/23 at $340 per parcel.
Second.
Motion by Jensen, second by Quinn. Roll call vote.
Director Grace?
Aye.
Director Jensen?
Aye.
Director Quinn?
Aye.
President Han?
Aye, 4-0. Adopt resolution 22/23-06, setting the tax rate for improvement district number 2 bonds fiscal year 22-23 at that percentage per 1,000 assessed value of property. Is there a motion?
I move the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 22/23-06, setting the tax rate for improvement district number 2 bonds for fiscal year 2021-22. Can't be 22-23. At .00150888% per $1,000 of assessed value of property.
You have a different number?
I have a different number
It's
on
the
the.
fiscal year.
Herba, which one is correct? It's the 05.
I've got different
The
zeros.
motion is correct, there's a typo.
Type on the agenda?
Yeah.
Okay, or on the right, agenda. All right, the motion's correct. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Quinn, second by Grace. Roll call vote.
Director Grace?
Aye.
Director Jensen?
Aye.
Director Quinn?
Aye.
President Han?
Aye, motion carries 4-0. Adopt resolution 22/2307, setting water standby charge fiscal year 22-23 at 40/20/28. Yep. Okay.
Mr. President, I move the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 22/23-07, setting water standby charges for fiscal year 2022-23 at $40.28.
Second.
Motion by seconds. Motion by Grace, second by Quinn. Roll call vote.
Director Grace?
Aye.
Director Jensen?
Aye.
Director Quinn?
Aye.
President Han?
Aye, motion carries 4-0. Adopt resolution 22/2308, setting the sewer standby charge for fiscal year 22-23 at $59.96. Is there a motion?
I move the Board of Directors adopt resolution 22/23-08, setting the sewer standby charges for fiscal year 2022-23 at $59.96.
Second.
Motion by Jensen, second by Quinn. Roll call vote.
Director Grace?
Aye.
Director Jensen?
Aye.
Director Quinn?
Aye.
President Han?
Aye, motion carries 4-0. Item D, adopt resolution 22/23-09, calling for an election to increase the police services special tax and requesting consolidation with the general election on November 8th, 2022. Public hearing item. I don't think anyone's here for this item.
Mr. President, I recommend a 10-minute break. We've got a long discussion.
Any objection? All right, we're gonna break for 10 minutes, and that means 10. We're coming back at 1940.
Finances. Our finances for the general fund are are relatively limited. The largest is our property tax. The next couple of largest are in fact the special police tax and the special gate tax. And in that report, I suggested that the next item for you to take a look at would be those special taxes. And the one that I did exclude was the special assessment for the roads, because I envisioned that rehabilitation or replacements of roadways ought to be kind of withheld till we get the plan that will tell us what we need to do on the water system. So I put it off, from my perspective, tabled that one for now, and suggested we focus on those two, gate and police tax. So then I made a presentation to the board. I encouraged some input from each of you, and I had developed a modeling tool intended to help us all understand the impact on the district finances with increasing amounts of a special tax. Again, we understood this is something for the residents to weigh in on with a ballot, so it requires a vote. The scenarios that we reviewed at that study session included what I would call the kind of the baseline, another that was a little bit more, provided some funding for the roads, capital equipment, and the roads as a sum of money to be used for continued road repairs. Some other options included fully funding the services, and as a backdrop, even in the model, the numbers I shared with you and the public was to fully fund the police department from this point for 20 years is approximately starting with $500 and then indexing it 3%. And when you put that into the model, you minimize any general fund contribution to either of these, but in the case of police. Similarly, the dollar number was 185 for the gate, indexed 3%, and so for 20 years, and the model didn't go beyond 20, but I'd be confident it would hang in there, because for the next 20 years, it's just a minimal, and you can't model it, and I don't know, it's worth modeling it down to zero. So it's a de minimis contribution from the general fund. So we had a couple other scenarios trying to put those out there. One included a 1% indexing per year, so adjust it up and then put 1%, and then there was one that had effectively zero police, and so what the effect of that would be. At the end of that work session, there was the suggestion that we poll the residents and try to get their feedback before this point where you would be looking to put an item onto a ballot. And suggestion to use our Exchange HQ, which is our newest tool for outreach, and I think an excellent suggestion. And so what we used were the two scenarios, and I remember sitting here asking the board if we have a consensus about we're gonna run these two, and took that and worked to get this poll out. The two that you selected of those 6 I think we looked at was the kind of the minimum. That would have the gate tax go from 75 a year to 100 a year. And for the police tax, that would go from 80 a year to 180 a year. And the impact there is, yes, because now we'd be generating an extra $400,000 a year, and that's good, but it will peter out. It'll run out of gas in about 13, 14 years. So yes, you achieve some stability for a while. The second model we were asked to put out was the one where the police tax would increase to 300 and the gate tax would increase to 165. And they were, and I know there may be criticism about the poll because of this, but at the time we did the modeling, you know, we could have adjusted the numbers any which way. The only caveat probably is that at some point we shouldn't see in the model that the revenue would exceed the expenses. So I've always envisioned the 500 index, 185 index is kind of the max for fully funding. So we and for Megan, wherever she went, she's still here, did a great job of engaging more residents, and I think the pool was of those who had come to that study session where we'd gone through all of this to help frame up and give input on the poll. And then we did a flyer, which again I thought was well done and mailed to each address so that as many people, hopefully as we could, would see it and participate and give you great data about what are they thinking. At the end of this poll, we ran it for I believe 9 days. The margin of error based on the number of responses, and I believe we got 600 and something along those lines, was in the 4% range. So the upshot of it, the questions posed were, option one, would you vote for it? And we had some other information that I think helps confirm their residence or something like that. Megan can address that, but relative to the statistics, would you vote for option one, the 100, 180? Would you vote for option two, 300, 165? Would you vote for either of those, or would you vote for neither of those? And the tallies, the board's seen it. If did you have it out here, Christy, just for a reference? If not, I'll just represent it like this. This is the size of this this report by the time it got done. Had every response, how they respond to questions, and their comments, which I think were enlightening as well. So the net effect, percentage-wise, for option one, if you presume that the other two answers, I vote for one or two or both, right, was 79%. So that first model, first option one, 79%. And again, there's a plus and minus margin of error there. The second one, which is the model two, the higher of the two, that had about a 62%, again, plus or minus. So the takeaway is there seems to be very strong support for the first option, strong support for the second option, although it doesn't quite reach the threshold of a supermajority that would be required, but nonetheless, pretty good showing. So that's the results of the polling. And so these are on the agenda tonight for your consideration. If we're going to try to get to the November ballot of this year with these questions for our public, we have until the 11th or 12th, Christy, of August.
Yes,
So we're still in that timeline. I do envision if the board makes a decision to select something and put it onto the ballot, that I would be making presentations again like we did to share information and answer questions for the water or the sewer or the solid waste rate adjustment. So we did an outreach for all of those. We would, I expect, continue to try to educate and inform people and answer their questions. And again, you I believe understand we aren't advocating, if you put it on the ballot, our role is informational, educational. And so I do see that being a part of it, and if you had the second option, maybe some of that could help. I don't know. I'll be quiet for a moment and answer any questions you may have. If you'd like some more detail, we can provide it. And I look to Megan because she ran the engagement HQ and put the poll together.
Did you have anything to add?
I have a lot to add, but I think there's two different issues here. It's a two-part process. One, obviously, you've seen draft documents of the resolution, but they're blank as to the numbers. So, suggestion whether you want to address a number, and if you even want to proceed. Because if you don't, then there would be no need for my report about the process, but you might want to have that discussion, or I can talk about the process and a slight proposed change to how we may present an increase on the ballot. So I'll defer to whether you want to continue this discussion and pick the number, or would you like my presentation now on the legal side?
Anyone want to hear from a lawyer?
No.
Sorry about that. Okay. Well, why don't we open? Why don't we open item D then? This putting the police tax on a ballot for November. Why don't we open that up for public comment?
Richard Bissell, one quick question. Who actually gets to vote for it?
Sure.
From all the people that live here, own property here, where they're registered to vote, etc.
Right. The answer to that is registered voters in Bear Valley Springs. It doesn't matter if you're a renter or an owner. You have to be over 18. You have to be registered to vote, but registered voters in the Bear Valley Springs proper. That's who would vote on this. Am I right?
Yes, that is correct. Before you go to the public though, then I would suggest that I would do my presentation, and my question is whether you wanted to have a internal discussion about thoughts. But if you're ready to move on, then I would like to.
Just amongst the board members, what do you guys want to do?
Let's hear it.
I'd rather hear that and then have the public comment before we discuss.
On everything. Yes.
Okay, we get to hear from the attorney.
Sorry, folks. But without the attorney, you don't get a ballot measure. So, you've all hopefully seen the agenda package here. As you know, to adjust a special tax under Prop 218, we have to have an election. The police tax was actually adopted right after Prop 218 was done. Prop 218 was approved in 1996, 1997. The district had to, if it wanted to impose the tax, go out to an election. The way you do it is you call an election, you present a ballot question, and what the district did back then and also did with the gate tax was basically take a very simple approach. They just put a measure on the ballot saying, do you approve this tax for this purpose, and had some other language in it. Very, very simple, straightforward approach. An alternative way to do it, and what I did in the agenda package was sort of mimic what had been done in the past. Just keep it simple. But after I prepared the agenda report, I had what's called attorney's remorse.
There is such a thing.
I don't believe that's really a thing.
Even sharks have
I've never
remorse.
met a remorseful attorney.
That's right.
But no, what I began to think about, that the process has become a little bit more complicated over the years, and actually what you saw tonight, you actually just voted on our tax measure resolution, but there's actually nothing in the ballot measures from before that talk about it being done annually, how it's going to be done, and all those details. So, and then since Prop 218 was enacted, the legislature also adopted what's called omnibus implementation regulations that require things like The special taxes have to be used for a special limited purpose. They have to go in a separate account, and there has to be an annual report on those things too. The board also has some suggestions that I heard about potential additional oversight. So once you start adding all those things in, it occurred to me that it would be probably beneficial at this time for us to present the ballot measure, if it goes forward, as an ordinance. So I went back and I prepared a very simple 2-page, I don't get paid by the page. A very simple ordinance that basically puts everything together in one place so that the people will be voting on the adoption of an ordinance or legislation, which you're very familiar with, because all the props you do that change the Constitution or add something to the government code, they're all, a bunch of legislation. So what the district did in the past and what I originally proposed is fine for a parcel tax, but I do think it would be helpful for the board, the public, to kind of have one document that sets forth everything. So let me just go through it. It's very simple. I don't think this will confuse voters in any way, and I think it may even, if you do decide to proceed, gather more support, because it's very clear what you can and can't do going forward, which I think is part of the exercise here. So a simple introduction and saying, here's the authority, we're doing this as authorized and consistent with Prop 218, those are the references to Article 13, B and C. There are 2 separate provisions in the government code authorizing special districts to adopt special tax, and then also for each of our, because we provide a particular service, we represent reference for the police services, the authority that we have to provide police services for the gate. We actually have special legislation that allows us for the gate. So pretty straightforward authority section, basic definitions about the police department we're referring to. Hold your applause, please. who the board of directors are, the district, and the special tax is referring to the special tax in this ordinance. But the next several ones are the critical ones. The meat of this is really in section 3 and 4. The purpose of the tax. It's a special tax, and for the police department, the proposal, consistent with how it is existing now, is that money generated by the tax will go to pay for the salaries and benefit of police department personnel. That's it. That's all it can be used for. That's what is now current, and so this would be in this ordinance too, just specifying that particular purpose. Section 4 then, and this is where the blank is, where the board needs to discuss, okay, what's your number? We know now you have $80. We're assuming the discussion tonight is something above 80. The board will have that discussion separately, but that will become, and what that's called is the maximum amount. That's, you can't do it more than the maximum amount. That would be in the ordinance as well, by parcel. And then some additional languages specifying what we did tonight, that, okay, this will be set annually, assuming that it'll probably be maintained at the maximum rate, but the board could always, adjust it lower if there was some reason to. So that's why it's done every year that way, but there's a procedural part in here again that's not in our current measures. And then section 5 goes on basically just restating the process. This goes on as a special tax. It goes on your property tax bill. It's going to be collected by Kern County. It's subject to the penalties if you don't pay on time. And then it also has language down the bottom that the proceeds go into a special account as required by law too. And again, restates the purpose that this is to go for personnel and benefit costs of the Bear Valley Police Department. Okay. The next section is the annual report. This is required under the government code. This was, again, as I said, a post-Prop 218 requirement that there be an annual report that's done that specifies the amount generated, how it was used, and the purposes of the expenditures. Based on some comments from board members. There was a desire potentially, and you could strike this or keep this out, but to put an added layer of review on that included as part of an audit. And I'm assuming you could easily do it as part of our regular audit each year. You already have somebody coming in, they would just look at this specifically and ensure that, yes, the annual report's consistent with your ordinance, consistent with Prop 218, that the funds were used for the purpose specified. So a double layer of public transparency. One, an annual report gets generated, which it already has been and will continue to be, and then two, potentially just an audit to have an independent auditor look at that as well. So that's really the heart of it. Severability clause is just a standard protection that we put in all ordinances. If there's some little word or sentence wrong, that we're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. That you would sever something because you want this to be in place, so if there's a mistake, we'll go back and correct it, but it doesn't invalidate the whole measure because it's too important legislation. And then just, the effective date is, this is subject to the voters voting on it and passing it, and once they do it, then it becomes effective. But I also wanted to clarify, since if you take this route, do the ordinance as part of the ballot measure, I wanted to be clear that there are not going to be two taxes out there. There's not going to be an $80 tax that remains in effect, and then this new tax, that if you do adopt this, then the 1997 tax would go away. So again, I think that's important, pretty straightforward and clear. So then in the resolution, all that I've done is remove some of these duplicative provisions from the resolution, put them in the ordinance, and then the ballot measure question. Christy, can you pull up the resolution? Yeah, keep going. So the question is rephrased a little bit, and let me just read it with you here. Shall the police services special tax ordinance, which you just saw, the 2-page document, imposing a flat tax on each parcel of real property within the Bear Valley CSD at a maximum rate of X per year to be billed on the property tax bill by Kern County, and restating the limited purpose of it, be adopted. So you're essentially saying that the vote will be to adopt the ordinance, and then the ordinance adopts the increased tax rate. So I do recommend this. I apologize for any confusion by the initial report where I was kind of replicating what we had done in the past to keep it simple, but I do hope that after you see this, it's not a very complicated thing. It's not like your typical propositions that go on for 50 pages. It's, I think, very straightforward. And the beauty is that we can always go back, look, there's an ordinance in place. Show me that tax ordinance. What does it require? Everything's in one place, so you're not looking at a resolution that mostly calls for an election, having kind of directory provisions even here about the future. It's all in one document. So, and this is commonly done, parcel taxes. There was nothing wrong with the way the district did it before, but I think this way is just a little bit sounder, and I do recommend the change. So for both of them, I've done the same thing. I won't go, the gate tax is exactly the same, just with some different language, and the resolutions are essentially identical to calling for the election, placing both the ballot measure question, and then what the Kern County will do is they'll take this question, below it there'll be a yes or no, and then there'll be the full text of the ordinance below it. So that is how it would appear on the ballot.
Thank you. Public comment? I guess there aren't any.
Is the hearing open?
Yes, and this is a public hearing,
All right,
so thank you. We should open the
just to
public
let the
hearing.
record reflect 2007. We're opening a public hearing on this special tax item for police tax.
I'd like to ask legal counsel, we have so many people here that love to nitpick verbiage of everything. Shouldn't there be some more verbiage put in there that not just the salaries and the benefits, but also some other essential costs of the police department might be covered by those fees, such as tires and or fuel or anything else that would be an itemized thing that comes into normal costs of a police department? Or are those?
I'm closer, I think, because when you look at the fiscal analysis, because even with an increase, unless you were to do a really significant increase, you're not covering the salaries and benefits.
Well, I know we're not
So
covering that.
You're never going to get to the tires, the walkie-talkies. and
Well,
other
I
things
realize
with
that,
the
but
money.
I'm just thinking about the way that things are itemized in a financial statement by the police department, the CSD and other departments, and the way Bear Valley residents have a way of taking everything apart and going, but you didn't say you were gonna buy pencils for the police department, you're not allowed to do that. And Mr. Jensen's big thing about parking a $60,000 piece of equipment on Bear Valley Road and leaving it for 2 hours. Like as if we're in some city where somebody's gonna start stealing the equipment or vandalizing it. We're in Bear Valley. But we do have people that nitpick every single thing. So if you give a flashlight bulb to an officer out of the CSD office, we need to account for it. Because he's gonna ask, how come? So I'm just saying, maybe think about that before it hits a ballot where somebody is gonna say, it's not there, you can't give him a roll of tape.
I'll defer to the board on that, but I think, again, we're replicating what's been in place since 1997.
And that wasn't good enough.
Always gone for that limited purpose, and frankly, it's more easy to account for because you have some basic salary items that are going to eat up all that funding, rather than getting into equipment and things like that.
Okay.
I think makes it
I
easy
just
reporting, but
wanted to give you a little bit of leeway there in case people get nitpicky.
Mr. President,
Thank you, Ms. Dowell.
as you, if you were at the maximum amounts indexed, then I could see where, that would occur. And we could probably, identify the number, to kind of push that envelope if you wish to, but just, short of that, these couple of models that we did pull on, they didn't do it.
Okay.
So if I have that straight, if we were to take the police budget of, 1.7-ish million, we could divide that by the number of properties and come up with that number, and if we were gonna put that number on this resolution ordinance, then we'd be concerned. That's what I think we're saying here. Okay, thank you. Public comment, Ms. Carey.
Kathy Carey, I'd like to think that the public and as a whole is going to rise above all of this nonsense and do what we need to do for our precious investments that we all own within this valley. I am really pleased with the vote that you did on the COLA. I think that that's going to actually be a benefit when it comes to trying to get the public to vote for any other increases, because it's a compromise. We're all working our butts off, we're all doing well, but it's a compromise. You left the door open to be able to readdress that and do an increase. So that's wonderful. We need to fully fund these accounts. Bottom line, no Band-Aids, fully funded. Only concern, and it's a big concern, is do we have enough time to be able to really promote this and educate it properly from August to November 5th. That's my only concern. CSD is gonna have to step it up to the plate, huge. We as a community will step it up to a plate, huge. We can't pass this down any longer. We need to do it.
Next. Mr. Hernandez.
Good evening, staff, members of the board. My name is Martin Hernandez. I just want to encourage you to consider a couple of other options. Having been on the city council in Santa Paula and successfully passing a special tax for public safety, there's a couple things that really made that possible, I think, in my opinion. And one was to, I heard your attorney speak of it, which was very good. Have some kind of oversight body to review the budget, specifically with a special tax outside of an audit that's a community oversight committee, to look at the spending for that money each year and give feedback to the board of directors, which really helped the public feel they had a part in oversight and gave them the power to vote in favor of that special tax. Secondly, I agree with Kathy that the time is of the essence, And if you're going to have any chance of success, which we had in Santa Paula, and that was to have enough time to do incredible amount of, well, we pounded the pavement, because you could in Santa Paula, and knock on doors. You can't do that here very logistically, successfully. So just, I think Mr. Malinin referred to that in having outreach sessions at the Whiting Center and at Cub Lake and wherever you can, the Oak Creek Tree Country Club, to educate the public about it. I think it's really important and valuable because a lot of people still don't understand the differences between the CSD's budget and the special taxes and the HOA fees that we pay. I mean, that's fairly simple for a lot of folks, but for some folks, and our seniors and our most vulnerable populations who really benefit the most from our public safety, don't understand that sometimes, and it would really be helpful to get them to support that effort. And lastly, probably a question for our attorney. I was a little confused by the last measure that was in '96, that there was no CPI index attached to that annually. Was there any reason why, and any reason why that couldn't be considered if in fact the lower option were chosen and had a CPI attached, so that over the years it would increase with inflation? Can you speak legally why that's not an option? Or is it?
No, it is a potential option. There was one in the '96 measure. It was part of a resolution. It referenced it, I believe, in the measure, subject to a CPI. That was, I think what the board did back then was to, it's CPI or capped at 3%. That was back in the good old days. When,
yeah, 3% was enough.
3% seemed huge. So,
Yes.
So that is an option. That was not my direction in preparing this, but if that's something that, you know, the board wants, that could be added, you know, to the measure too, some kind of index.
So maybe I'm confused.
With the cap or.
I understood that there was no index attached to the current tax, that's why it's been stagnant for
Correct.
some years.
Correct.
So that 3% didn't.
I think that might have been the other election.
2016.
Right, it was the one that didn't pay. You mentioned
That's
26,
right.
it
That's
didn't
what I heard.
pass, so that's why it's
Right.
not there.
So
I
you
mean,
had to do it
it
again
got
without-
58%, which
It's
you could
close.
argue passes if it was, you know,
Right.
citizen issue.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yes.
But it is still an option. if-
Yes, yes.
For the board's discussion.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Next, public, please.
Nobody else wants to go for it, go? I'll go.
I did.
I am in the unique position of being able to be a lot more upbeat about this. There has been a lot of negativity, but the golden lining has been that the awareness has been raised amazingly. And so I'm hoping to address Kathy's concerns. And I'm in the unique position that I spent however many days it was, the last time, July 4th booth, support the BVSPD the last time, and this year, 3 full days this year, and many, many thanks to the wonderful volunteers who helped me. I have spoken with literally hundreds of BVS residents, and I am many things, many obnoxious things, and I am surprisingly not everyone's cup of tea, but one thing I am not is a liar. And if I say I have spoken with hundreds of people, that is what I have done. And everybody wants this to pass. Everybody wants us to fund our BVS PD and keep them. And there will be made mention on social media tomorrow that I'm not very truthful, but that will be incorrect. And I'm happy to take those slings and arrows to protect other people. And so if anybody wants to ask questions about that, or if there's anybody who feels that they know, who knows more about what the residents feel in this community about the PD, I've spoken with hundreds, literally, and I can tell you, maybe each year 4 or 5 people were against it, everybody else was for it. And so I would encourage the board of directors to go ahead and pass this. As I say, we do have the option that we can do it as residents. If you don't, that's a lot more work for all of us now. I mean, I think there's a lot of work to be done anyway. I think everybody's right. We have to do a lot of education. We have to do a lot of outreach. But I really, really think that the negativity has produced a phoenix. It has brought forth this golden opportunity for us. It has demonstrated clearly just how much everybody, and almost everybody, the vast majority, I can say with absolute certitude, want the police department to be fully funded. They don't want any more shenanigans, and in my worst southern accent, they just want to get her done.
We're still on public comment. Anybody else? In the back, I see a hand but no face. There you are.
Do I have to go up there?
Yes, please.
Yes, yes, you must. Let's say yes. Okay, this is more a technical question for the attorney.
We need your name.
Caroline Compan Carpenter. So my question is this: you originally prepared something else and then you changed it to an ordinance. Is there a difference? How does it affect us? I want to make sure this is completely transparent to everybody. One of the things I was thinking about, if this is an ordinance, let's say 8 years down the road, can the board change it at any time they want without having to go to the majority of the residents?
No.
Okay.
On the substantive tax provisions, okay, if the board wanted to maybe remove the audit part in the future, potentially, because that's not something that requires a special voter approval on, it's a tax part.
Okay.
But, so substantively, no difference, and I think as you saw, if you looked at the original measure, you know, it's one line trying to say everything. Well, let's increase our tax and have oversight and do all this stuff, and it's a long run-on sentence versus 2 pages that say the same thing.
Okay, that answers my question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Going back to the nitpicking comment, I want to make sure I clarify this for myself, because when we do the police department, we do build in their external costs in the budget. And my way of thinking was that what we were proposed forward was a self-funded police department, fully funded police department with this new tax. That to me would be inclusive of whatever additional equipment they need, cars, etc. Now, I don't particularly have a big excitement about allocating administrative services or something to the PD, because quite frankly, we are a small group of employees, and we're not gonna get rid of an employee if suddenly we didn't have the police department. We still need the 80% of their function to occur. So I don't care about the allocation, but what is going to fund all of their equipment and these types of things in the future? Is that still pulling from the general fund, which is what we are trying, in effect, the majority of us who are saying, okay, I'll pay the extra tax, but I don't want you to pull any money out of my general fund. I want that to go to my water. I want that to go to my roads. So can you clarify for us what this amount of money is going to pay? Right now, it sounds like it's gonna be salary and benefits only, and that is not what people are putting out there when they talk about the increase and they're trying to sell it to the residents. There's still gonna be a dip into the general fund as far as I can tell. If you could clarify that, please.
Mr. President, members of the board, I can try. And part of the answer is it depends upon the number that the board wishes to try to get approved. So if it's a larger number, then again, you can envision that there could be a conflict if it says just salaries and benefits. And we've put the number up there relatively high for either of them. So the model, again, I think can help address that. but it depends on what's the final decision.
I just think that the ordinance needs to read, to fund the salaries, benefits, and material capital allocations required for the CSD Police Department. It should be all inclusive, and if that number is 600, not 500, then let the people know that's what it requires to have a fully functioning police department. We're grown-ups.
More public comment? All right, Board of Directors, Mr. Grace.
Lots of thoughts, lots of comments.
I'm sorry, Mr. President, are you closing the?
No, what are comments on the public hearing, guys? All right, we can close the public hearing. We kept it open for the budget, but we're not gonna reopen it, I hope. Yeah. All right, so what do we got, 2023? Hereby close the public hearing on police tax item.
Thank you, Mr. President. My first comment is I have certainly scrutinized the poll. I appreciate all the effort Bill, Megan, everybody put into the poll. It was originally my idea, and it kind of morphed into something I was looking for, more of a straw poll, and it really got a life of its own, which, as you and I discussed, Bill, was a good thing, because it provided some key information. So I appreciate all the effort that staff has put into the poll, and I appreciate the results. I have read all 600 pages of it, every comment. I confess I have not scrutinized every comment, but I have put my eyes on every comment. So rest assured, members of the public, I have done that. I've also gotten, I want to say 35 emails over the last 3 days. I've read every one of those. Some of them I've responded to that were more heartfelt than others. Some of them that I had significant issues with, likewise, but have taken that input to heart and fully considered it. My philosophy of life and our democracy was well stated when we had the kerfuffle about the appointment of somebody to fill Mr. Carlin's seat. I stated at the time, and I state today, it is best for the people out there, not the people up here, to decide the direction and the future of this valley. I said it then, and I'll say it now. I have no reservations about a ballot measure. I think it is up to the people to decide, and that's the way it should be. All we are doing here is setting the framework for it and giving the people the tools to do what they need to do, or they will not ultimately do. That remains to be seen. So I support a public vote, and I guess I share, to Ms. Carey's point and a lot of the other comments, I have a certain faith in people that they'll do the right thing, even if that is not voting for this. At the end of the day, that is how our system is set up, is that whatever the vote is, that's the best thing. So that's my philosophy. I know there are a lot of folks that might disagree with that, but that's how I live life and how I look at our system at a federal level and here in Bear Valley. I think I might be personally responsible for Mr. Davis's remorse, if not attorney heartburn, as I made it pretty clear to Bill about 10 days to 2 weeks. I wanted to give him adequate time to respond. I made it pretty clear if I was going to consider putting this on the ballot, that I needed assurance that the funds would go to where they were supposed to go. They would go to police, that there would be an audit provision, not just a report, but a third-party audit, again, to confirm that the funds that have been collected by the people are going where they're supposed to go, and an ordinance. Again, this question of the ordinance versus resolution is something that came up most recently in another kerfuffle, which was the spending policy. And I stand by it today that we need that as an ordinance. We need the power of law. Not that I don't trust Mr. Malinan or his staff, but what are we gonna do 10 years from now if we get another general manager in here that may not be of the caliber? That's what we have to think about. I think it's appropriate to have the power of law behind behind how this money is spent if the people are going to dig into their pockets and make the sacrifices that we talked about earlier during the COLA. So that's kind of my philosophy on the whole thing. I struggle with the idea of kicking the can down the road. All I've heard over the last 2 years almost, people always say, you know, you've been on the board 2 years. I haven't been on the board 2 years. I've been on the board 18 months. They probably wish it was 2 years. But all I've heard in my time on the board, and even since I've lived here, is those dadgum board members that came before you, they kicked the can down the road, they did this community a disservice. I don't want that to be us. I realize there are political realities of getting this passed, and again, it boils down to what the people are gonna do and what they're gonna sacrifice. Is it important enough to them, ultimately? And candidly, that burden falls on a lot of you. You're the ones that are gonna pound the pavement, as Mr. Hernandez says, and I do think we have some pavement to pound here in Bear Valley. But in any event, I guess that's my long-winded way of saying, if we're going to do this, it needs to be full freight, painful as that may be. Now, I don't know what that does to the concept of externalities and equipment and other things. Typically, those are capital improvement components if we buy a new truck or something like that. But if that is an issue, I would want to know what that number is, because I personally, we don't want to do this again. God willing, I hope to be living here 20 years from now. I'm going to be even more ornery then, and I don't want to have to go through this. I don't want to have to go through this process anytime before then. The other concept that Bill and I talked about, and I'd like to hear Mr. Davis's concept, is multiple ballots, multiple ballot measures. And what I mean by that is, do we put the $300 a year question on the ballot, and do we also put the $500 a year question on the ballot? And if they both get 2/3, the board or whomever, you know, I don't know if it can defer. These are all questions, but that's one of the things I'm thinking. I know in some of the county level and state level marijuana provisions, for example, there were 2 and 3 different ballots on the same issue that the people got the choice. But I guess I have trouble supporting anything other than full freight. I think we need to bite the bullet and stand up. And are we going to support?
Yeah, I just have a couple questions for Mr. Mallon or Megan. The BV Exchange post seemed to infer that we've inquired about municipal bonds for infrastructure, and we couldn't qualify because we were too upside down on our police and gate taxes. Is that true?
I'm not sure I'm familiar with the reference, so maybe I can try to answer the question this way. If we are going to borrow money, and bonds are another way of saying you're taking out a loan, but the reason you use bonds is because now they are transferable, they can be bought and sold, and so on. So the market is wide open, so to speak. So you borrow, pick a number, you borrow $10 million. What the underwriters, essentially the bankers and the financial consultants, will be looking towards is your financial wherewithal and stability to repay that loan like they would if you went to buy a car or a house. We all experience that, it's just in a different industry. To the extent that this is something of a general fund borrowing, then certainly they're going to look at the strength and stability of the general fund. If it were for some other enterprise funds, they'll look specifically at that enterprise fund. The general fund secondarily is a source for the bankers. So what you may see is that they'll ask for you to put your full faith and credit behind these borrowings with your general fund. To the extent it's weak, that might create a problem. The problem could get solved by just having to absorb a higher interest rate. That's the risk component when you borrow. So it can have an impact, but you know, I don't know a specific scenario that you're talking about, so I hope that answers your question.
Sort of. So to be more clear, have we inquired about bonds, and if so, how much did we inquire about?
I have not.
You have not? Okay. But those bonds would ultimately be paid back by the homeowners as part of their property tax?
Sure, so via whatever revenue generating tool you create. So it could be the assessment or it could be the special tax.
And do we have any idea how much that would be for infrastructure, for?
No, we don't, and the reason for that at this point is, you know, the biggest piece of that puzzle remains to be the assessment that we've created a request for proposals, sent it out to a number of engineering firms, and part of the response is, we're so busy we can't take your project on. And I'm hopeful, and I like to be optimistic, that we'll find a qualified engineering firm to do that study for us, because it is the basis upon which we'll be creating a plan, and then we'll know what the number is. But you could very simply understand tens and tens of millions of dollars can be expended on the water system with not much effort.
Which would translate to how much liability per each property owner?
Well, without trying to do the math off the top of my head, it could be $1,000 a year, let's just say. So
For
if
20
you
years.
multiplied 3,600 by 1,000, I think you get 3.6 million. So, okay, we'd be generating that kind of money every year. Now, you can use it as a pay-as-you-go, or you could use it as some amount to pay for a borrowing, so you kind of jumpstart your construction or your project.
Why didn't we pull this as the full amount?
The direction consensus from the board was the two models that we put into the pool. So, you know, I wanted to be true to the direction that we got, and that was those two models. It was the ones I've already explained about. So, and I'll admit that wasn't I don't believe it was a motion second and a vote per se, but I asked the question a couple of times of the board, and I got the yes, those are the two we want you to ask about.
I don't recall that, but, and then why did we pull the gate and the police department together? Why didn't we pull these as two separate issues as they will be on the ballot?
Sure. Contextually, I would say it was that they had been kind of presented. Packaging may not be the right term because it wasn't intended to be a package, but they were the couple of different levels that you could have either one of these at. And at the end of this, you know, the board can put a number in for this one and put a number in for that one, and they could be entirely different than what we modeled. The point, I thought, was to try to get feedback on that. And so, you know, was it thought through to say, well, what if we ask about this? It wasn't, because the context of what direction I had was to do these two models. So in that model, they are joined at those levels.
But they didn't have to be. I mean, someone might wanna pay more for the gate and less for the police department, and more for the police department and less for the gate. But you didn't have the option in that poll.
And some of that feedback may have been in the commentaries. And so yes, I mean, I think have data that can show a level of support for either of the models. And that's the percentages of 79 and 62 that I shared with you at the beginning of this presentation. So, could it? Sure it could have. But contextually what I'm saying is when we were at our workshop and we were talking about what to pull, that's what we were told to pull.
Did you have to be a resident or a homeowner of Bear Valley to participate in the poll?
Megan, could you elaborate, please?
No.
No.
Huh?
I filtered, so I have the ability to filter for the results. I can
Megan,
choose.
excuse me, please, could you do this for the recording here at the podium?
So when I develop the poll on the exchange, people can choose to register with nothing more than an email address, or they can, if they're homeowners, give us their tract and lot. Renters also give tract and lot. And we have other people who aren't associated with Bear Valley. They may be employees who don't live here. They may be news reporters from Bakersfield or Tehachapi. So we do have the ability to filter for just primary residents and renters, the voters of Bear Valley. When I did the unfiltered and the filtered results, it was a 0.3% difference. So what I gave you was the unfiltered results.
And can you register for the poll and take the poll under multiple email accounts?
Yes.
So you can take the poll several times just by using a different email address?
If you create different accounts, yes.
Yes.
And there have been some accounts created that have been flagged as pseudonyms, people that we know don't live here. We have the ability to search the gatehouse records, things like that. I did have roughly 200 people sign up within the week the poll was open. So it did raise some concerns that somebody might be trying to stuff the ballot box for the poll. So I sat down and I went through each of those 223 new registered voters, and I looked up their email addresses and made sure that they were valid email addresses. There were a few that were not. Didn't matter in the poll results. 0.3% difference. I believe one was 79.3 and one was 79.7. It didn't matter.
Was this a random poll?
What do you mean?
Well, a random sampling is, you don't just take like everyone in the room, you take like every third person, every 5 person. and
It was
take
every
the results.
person who decided to take part in the poll. But I didn't just publish the poll online. We sent mailers to every address. We have a lot of people who are not active on social media who were inspired to take the poll. So it's not just next door people or just Facebook people or just people who go to the website. It's also our people who don't take part on social media.
All right. I don't have any more questions for you, thank you. So the problem I have with this is the whole putting the cart before the horse. Ultimately, we're gonna be seeking a bond measure that could result in over $1,000 per property to fix our water system. We're ultimately gonna reassess the roads assessment after we do that, so we can fix the roads to accommodate the water repairs. Now we have the police and gate assessments. I don't know why we're doing those first. That's my problem. So, that's all I have to say about that.
Mr. Quinn.
Were you gonna respond to Charles? Okay, thank you, Mr. President. Brother Grace has raised some interesting points about fully funding. I'm pleased that he said it, and when you consider $500 comes to $1.37 a day, And, you know, we can talk about these things, you know, well, our current is 23 cents a day, and the low is 49 cents a day, and the $300 is 82 cents a day. And if people are really living that close to the edge, they will not be able to be here very long. I'm doubting that anybody is in that position. I'm sorry, but this is not Appalachia in the 1950s. So I think that it would certainly be appropriate to go for fully funded, maybe $500 and a 1% escalator rather than 3% escalator. But even if we have to go to the $300 number, it is still a major improvement over where we are today. The $80, $180 option would be pointless as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't do anything for you.
Just delays the inevitable.
You know, you're going to be back at it so quickly that why bother? I think that's.
I'm with these guys. I like the idea of fully funded. Just rough math, $1.7 million divided by 3,600 properties is $472 a year. I think you also did the daily dollars and cents, which is not that much for the security and comfort that we get from the police department. Fiscal responsibility means fiscal sustainability. We can do this. So I would definitely support a full number. Perhaps we have this fully funded number on one line on the ballot in November, and then the escalator on a separate line, so people don't go, well, you're gonna shoot down this first line because we have the escalator built in. Maybe we can consider that. And those are my comments.
So, if I may, Mr. President, let me kind of answer Director Grace's question and sort of yours about the two-line thing. So Director Grace asked the question earlier, whether there could be, excuse me, multiple numbers put on the ballot. And I think the answer to that is no. That there's what's called in the Constitution, there's another provision about ballot measures have to be single issue questions. So what I've seen, if you look at ballot measures, it's typically a yes or no question. So there aren't typically multiple queries done. I think it's up to the board to choose, which is what you're struggling with, the best number, and put that forward. If it doesn't pass, boards usually come back and reassess things. I think where you may have seen, there certainly can be competing measures, typically from residents. I've never, and don't take this as, I can't speak with certainty because I've never seen a public agency offer up multiple measures on a ballot. I think it would create confusion, and that's the point of the single issue rule, is to avoid confusion. What are they doing here? Even though these measures we get sometimes with propositions are totally confusing, they're supposed to be a single issue, and there is law, and you could be subject to a challenge if there's confusion. And so I don't think, for that reason, you can do the multiple items. It's kind of, here's everything that you're voting on. But there can be situations where the public can bring forth multiple measures, and what happens there is if they cover the same topic area, the one that gets the most votes wins, assuming they each have sufficient things. So I've certainly seen that, and groups will do that to deflect against the other group. Well, they got that measure on, I don't like that, so I'm going to propose this to undermine it. So that does happen, but I've not seen a public agency attempt to do it. So I'd be leery of that. I haven't done tons of research. I've just never seen it, but it doesn't mean you can't. But I don't think you can do, and you also, I don't believe, can do you get two different options. You vote with or without the escalator clause in it. It's usually, that's part of the package. It's a package deal. Here's this, with the adjustment. So that is a factor to consider. Again, my direction on this was not to include that because again, it adds another wrinkle to it. I don't think you polled on that either, but you can certainly do that. I mean, you can frame the measure however you like, or whatever amount you want, and, you know, with escalator clauses or not, and I can propose language with an escalator, if, again, that's the board's collective desire.
So Don, is it reasonable to think that what I might have in my mind, and again, I'm going back a couple of elections ago, I think there were 2 or 3 marijuana measures in Kern County, and they literally, the nuances were one had hours of operation and the other one didn't, you know, or the part of town. Is it safe to think that those were either yes or no, or they were citizen?
I would think they were
Citizen
citizen, particularly
advocated.
marijuana,
Okay.
because there are a lot of people.
That's a bad example, I hate that's all I can recall to illustrate.
No, and that's what I said, that's why you get, and marijuana was certainly a hot one, hey, let's try different things.
But I
There was
literally
so
remember
much-
an election where there were 3 different
Right, but I
questions
don't
on
think
the
any
same.
public agency put multiple ones on public agencies. Public agency votes on the marijuana were generally about tax,
Right.
and they would say, here's our tax and here's what we're
Yeah,
proposing,
this was
and
more
we'll
use-
legalize
this
it,
was
and
more
we'll
land
tax
use-
it.
land use oriented.
Exactly, so I think they were initiatives.
Okay, thank you.
So we could have a, here's the new amount and here's an escalator, yes or no, or we can't, we have to have it in the same.
It's gotta be the
If
same,
we're
yes,
gonna-
combined, that your measure is everything you're doing.
Okay, so if we could go back in time and make this have an escalator, Bill calculated how much more revenue we would have generated over the last 20 years. I think, I'm not asking you to pull that out of your, unless you have it.
You mean my ear?
Here, yeah, I was gonna say here. But, it has a better chance of passing without the escalation, because the escalation just makes people wanna go, no, Cam, you want more every year? Yeah.
Well, if you call it an escalator,
Right.
the annual increase might go over a lot better.
All right, so, maybe,
$15 a year for a $500.
right. Okay, so where are we? We're on that item. Are we ready? Is there more discussion? You guys haven't seen anything else to add? Staff, order please.
Yeah, I know.
Order please. Thank you. Order motion?
Well, I think we need a little more discussion on what the numbers are as it relates to this question of multipliers and capital improvement and operational. Because again, I do not want to do this again in 10 years. Not that I'm gonna be here to do that in 10 years.
So part of what I can tell you about the model did not.
I guess my question, Bill, is $500 all in, or is it not all in and there's still other stuff? That it
Oh, it's,
doesn't-
I would say that is all in. Where I was going was if there were some limitations to making it only wages and benefits, then I gotta revisit it because it was everything, so.
So that's not just wages and benefits?
No,
that's-
it's fully funding. What we have as salaries, benefits, services, supplies, capital. Which again, I think I might have mentioned it, but for both models, it was including capital. So what the departments had indicated for their 20-year CIP, okay, and we know squads are needed somewhere, we know the gate had really minimal capital. And again, the whole reconfiguration is none of this is envisioning funding it.
That's a separate,
from here.
Separate fund.
Oh, yeah. And frankly, hopefully the plans get done and we can actually pay as you go on something like that with reserves and still be in good shape, so.
If I can just add, I mean, certainly if there's even a concern or the possibility of going there, it's easy to add the language. In fact, with the gate operations one, we do have language that talks about personnel and costs of associated gate equipment and facilities. So we can add that. I think the question for the board is, does that create any repercussions politically in terms of, oh, that's so much more expansive. So I think, and again, the direction on it was to just, what we have done was personnel in the past, so there was no reason for not doing it differently if you want.
I don't think we're well served by doing anything less than what it takes, and again, it's up to the voters. It's just kind of, in my mind, a ridiculous exercise to not include everything.
I'd like to think
So again, Bill, not to be thick-headed, but the 500 does include the 3% escalation? Or
No,
does-
that's the initial adjustment, so it would be something to the effect of $500. Then the following year, whether it's an automatic 3 or not to exceed, that's, I can factor that in all right. But it's an escalator required to keep pace.
There again, we are where we are today because there was no escalator voted in 16, so. It's a mood exercise without doing it.
Yeah, we don't wanna make mistakes this time.
A 3% escalator on 500 takes it about 920 years.
900 after 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like nothing.
It's nothing,
If you don't get that at work, it's nothing.
Is that-
851.22.
Yeah, but that's wonderful.
Close enough.
It's just off the top.
Close enough, yeah.
But I mean, that's at least, I mean, if we'd done something in 16, if we were all here, we could have saved our butts a little bit.
Just a reminder on that point, and that's part of the exercise of doing it annually, is that the board chooses what it sets at. So if in the future, there was no reason for full escalation, the board doesn't have to offer it. This is just setting maximum amounts. So I put that out too. If the economy recovers and we're flat and there's no inflation, the board could not,
Yeah,
include
that'd be
inflation.
great.
If it's at 1%, you could just elect not to do it.
But it'd be there if we needed it, and that's the
It's there,
bonus.
yes. What this sets your ceiling, remember, it's a ceiling. Board can always, if it's not necessary, you can set lower.
Yeah, cause the
But you
ceiling,
can't set any higher.
a ceiling of 0 is a real bad ceiling. So having something is better.
What else?
Bill, what's a 1%? What's a 1% escalation? Having attorney's remorse here.
So, we could, Christie, actually pull this up so everybody can see.
Your mom?
Yes, is that it?
Yep. You want the, pro forma?
Really, can we swap for a moment? Thanks. Can you see that all right?
Yeah.
Let me drive. Okay. So I'm gonna go down here, and what the model gives us is 500 and 185. Okay, I guess I'll drive the whole car.
Sounds good.
Okay, Jeff.
Fellas enjoy the
So, here's what we can do. We've inserted now, this is the police, so you've inserted 500. So in order to, answer your question, Mr. Grace, we're gonna go, that this is equal to that one, where's your, and that's not how it works. Okay, so those are $5 there, and then we're just gonna copy that across to the end here. Okay, and then, I'm understanding you wanna do the same with the 185, is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. And take that one. Did I put the right number in here? 1.01? Yeah, I did. So, this seems off. Oh, here's your 1%, here's your increases. Okay, so then what you wanna see, I believe, is what happens at the end of the day, right? So, we will be significantly over, but out here, I'm sorry to make you dizzy. We'll be in excellent shape financially, and we'll actually have excess fund balance 20 years from now of about $19 million. And where you, I think, wanna kinda get a look-see is how much of the, general fund is required to, you know, keep this thing going.
And that's just basing it on what we know it is now to run things.
Well, it is, but all of the expenses are indexed, annually out 20 years.
Oh, okay.
So we use the same indices that were in the, rate studies for the utility adjustments.
Oh, okay, great.
So.
It's a crapshoot, I mean, you don't know what a police department's gonna cost to run 20 years.
Understood.
Exactly.
Understood. But here's where we see, the delta. So the general fund surplus or deficit with the new PD and gate taxes is this line here in the model. And so you see it actually it's holding pace, pretty well. It's starting to tail off a little bit from a 1.7 and a 1.5 out there, 15, 18 years from now. In terms of how much are you freeing up in the general fund.
Right.
And then out here, you have a healthy fund balance. So I hope that answers your question.
It does.
And what's the amount of the $500 becomes what after 20 years with a 1% every year? I didn't just
All right.
miss this, so I know it's there.
Find out. Police, here we go. 600.
Yeah, 600.
Versus, what were we at, 855 or something like that? Yeah. And just for future reference on the gate, that'll get up to 221, 20 years from now. So, okay. I hope that helps or answers your question.
It does, thank you.
Gentlemen?
I would suggest splitting the baby at 2% escalator, $500 at 2% escalator. Cause again, it's a crapshoot, you're not gonna know, you don't know what it's gonna take, 2% is as much a shot in the dark as 3%.
Well, it's better than the 0%.
It's better than zero.
Absence is what,
And it also, it affects the ability of it to pass, in my opinion, cause it gives somebody another reason to shoot bullets at it. But I like it, don't get me wrong.
It also gives an assurance that we're not gonna have to do this again anytime soon.
Exactly.
Totally agree. What's your motion?
Okay, Mr. President, I move the Board of Directors adopt resolution 22/23-09, calling for the election to increase the police services special tax to $500 per parcel with a 3% escalator. I'm not sure, Don, the language in the motion, but with a 3% annual increase.
Maximum.
Maximum, maximum, yes.
Up to and not to exceed.
Requesting consolidation with the statewide general election on November 8th, 2022, and authorizing such other actions as may be necessary and convenient for the election on the proposed ballot measure.
Second.
2 points of clarification, just for the record, that the motion is on the revised resolution that would include the ordinance.
Indeed.
And then also the issue of expanding the uses to include equipment, supplies, and facilities as what it can be used for, the purposes.
Do I need to say all that, or?
If you acknowledge that that's.
I
what
acknowledge
you're-
that, and I think I might have
intended.
misspoken, I think I said 3% escalation,
You did.
I meant to say 2%. Yes, so that should be.
But you got religion.
Yes.
2%, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Does the
Once again, I'll second.
Does the revised language need to be in the motion? The revised?
Well, he clarified it with my question, so that we're talking about what the directors received, the revised resolution and ordinance, that includes ordinance language, and then these changes will be made to the final documents.
So not to put Christie on the spot, but can you read that? Read that back.
Okay.
I am putting you on the spot.
Okay. I move the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 22-2309, calling for an election,
As revised.
As revised. Calling for an election to increase the police services special tax to $500, including a maximum of 2% annual escalator, and requesting consolidation with the general election on November 8th, 2022.
You're missing that up too.
Right, so quick question on the way the CPI works, or the inflationary adjustment is how I would phrase it in a measure, it's a better term, is that it's either a CPI index or not to exceed 2%, or is your motion just a flat 2%? I mean, the way we're going now, they'll usually be 2%, but if you had a year where CPI was only 1%, then using the index, it would be 1%. So is that what
I think that's,
desire is?
so to the president's comment about the ability to make it feasible to the public, I would say let's set it at whatever the CPI is with a maximum of 2%. That would be
That's the
my
clarification we're looking for.
That's what it was in 2016 on Measure G.
Yes, yeah, except it was 3%.
Yes.
Did we want to discuss which index? Because there's been questions about which index is feasible to use.
Mr. President, and
Don't know if we have much choice if there are
the
four.
LA Riverside is the closest to us. Okay, because Phil doesn't have one in an SM.
I don't have the same heartburn as I did on the COLA, that it's.
Actually, it's a San Bernardino, Riverside, Ontario.
That one's usually.
That's
higher.
probably better.
Wages.
Want to average them?
It's a San Bernardino.
You have the language.
I just have the ballot language that.
No, the original one I sent had a CPI.
Oh.
And it had language in it from
Yeah,
the,
we took that one out. I can bring it up.
do you have it, Christie? It was an email probably last week.
Well, if it makes you feel better, I've never seen so many people so happy to have an increase. So, hands of applause for everybody who was on board.
No, the room is happy and it looks like most of the board is.
I might counsel you to wait until I make my director comments at the end of the meeting, so.
As long as everybody votes the way we hope we will, we'll listen to whatever you have to say.
I'm looking for it.
Yeah, I have it, I can read it, so it would be, the police special tax will be subject to annual inflationary adjustments in an amount not to exceed the lesser of A, the annual percentage increase, if any, in the consumer price index, urban wage earners and clerical workers. The reason I used that one was because it was personnel. I mean, it's a little bit different than CPI, but bulk of the money goes to personnel. All items for the Riverside, San Bernardino, Ontario area. So I felt that was a little bit more reflective, because I agree with the criticism of the LA not being particularly reflective. Or be 2%. Is that would?
The lesser of.
What's a, yes, it's the lesser of.
Yeah, I would agree, let's go with lesser of.
Okay. And then the additional language, the calculations are made on the change year over year, based in May, because you usually make these decisions in June, July. So that gives you time to know what it is.
Christie, could we have it back then again, just for the record, what our motion is?
Want me to try, Christie? Okay, I think
If you got it, go ahead.
All right. I move the Board of Directors adopt the revised resolution 22-2309 that includes a ordinance ballot measure to increase the police services special tax to $500, subject to an annual inflationary adjustment of the lesser of the Riverside San Bernardino clerical workers CPIW, or 2%. And also the measure will be revised to include not only personnel and benefits and salaries, but also equipment, supplies, and facility costs, as well as the purposes and the rest.
And all that other stuff.
Is that your motion?
I will make that motion.
I'll second again.
Motion by Director Grace, second by Director Quinn. Roll call vote, please.
Director Grace?
Aye.
Director Jensen?
No.
Director Quinn?
Aye.
President Han?
Aye. Motion passes 3-1.
Mr. President, I had to step away for a moment.
Okay.
I'll be back. Vin,
You mind if we start on D? It's gonna be a lot of the same, I think.
I think I know where we're going, so go ahead.
Okay, item E, adopt resolution 22-23-10, calling for an election to increase the gate operation special tax and requesting consolidation with the general election on November 8th, 2022. Public hearing item will open a public hearing for item E on the agenda at 21:10. Mr. Mallon.
Mr. President, members of the board, just running calculations, if the intent is to mirror the last resolution, I think that works actually pretty well. And financially, I think that will resolve the sustainability of that gate fund, as well as the amount for the police. And it should keep you in a relatively stable position with your annual difference being in a $1.8192 million range. So using 2% works, and at the end of a 20-year period, you'll have about, it says 24 million. So to the extent you are freeing up general fund monies for other purposes, you'll be in solid shape. I don't know what else I can add to that at this point.
Attorney again?
Same motion, different number?
Different ordinance too, Christie. Just for transparency, directors, if you don't mind, just like to show the public that, you know, I propose the same ordinance that you saw for the gate tax to move it to an ordinance, exactly the same provisions here. Obviously, if you're going to, we'll need to tweak it to include the CPI adjustment too. But this one did include not only personnel costs, but equipment and supplies too. So based on your prior motion, again, I would recommend the revised resolution that includes a ordinance as the ballot measure, and a rephrased question that we'll have to rephrase a little bit too, to just include the inflation adjustment in the part, because that's significant for the fiscal impact.
Okay, public
Thank
comment? Ms. Carey?
Kathy Carey. This one I have a little different thoughts on. I know that the liaison committee just met last week, I believe, as well. And Leslie Shyrock, the manager of the association, did comment on the possibility of looking into managing of our gate. Again, asking our public now to open their pocketbooks, hitting them up on 2 right now might be a little more challenging. I sure would love to see the PD one get funded, that's the big nut, and then possibly look at putting this on the 2024 election, postponing this a little bit. We as a community have to look at every option that we can to get the best service for the best price. The thing I like about the association, if it's possible, they manage other amenities. If you look at the special district sheet of California that Dave Hansen presented to us, our special district, I think it was 6 different divisions, different categories that we manage, where the majority of special districts don't have anywhere near that. A lot of the special districts did not manage a gate. That is a HOA item. Our HOA can increase our fees 20% a year without asking us. Our HOA can rebuild the gate, design it with their own staff without having to pay the rate of salaries that the CSD has. I just think, again, if we're really being as transparent to the public as we should be, we should look at every option on that. Again, I want it fully funded. Everything needs to be fully funded, but I honestly think that the CSD should get a serious look at a couple of other options on who can manage the gate the best, the cheapest, and the most effectively. Thank you.
Next public comment? Cool. Board, Mr. Grace.
My only comment, respectfully, I know Kathy where you stand, you know where I stand.
Mr. Grace.
I'm sorry.
Question, are we still in the public?
Do we need to close the public?
We can, is there any more comments for the public hearing? I don't think there were. All right, so Christie, 2114. Thank you, Mr. Grace. Close the public hearing. Mr. Grace.
Everything I just said, the gate is our first line of security. It's a policing force. The BVSA, with all due respect to them, they're not a police agency. So it's not something I think is realistic. There are lots of agencies out there that have lots of money that they could spend on it. That doesn't mean they have the expertise needed. So, not to belabor the point, but that's my only comment on that.
Mr. Jensen.
Just a few comments. I agree with Ms. Carey. In fact, I brought that up at the liaison committee, and Wesley did address it, and that opinion was concurred by a BVSA board member. So the question's been asked, the question's been answered. We know that is a possibility. As far as the gate needing to be a police agency, the gate isn't a police agency. Half the time you drive up there and there's someone wearing a white t-shirt and, opening and closing a gate. We don't have a police officer at the gate making sure that the people that come in without passes turn around and leave. Most of those people can just go right in.
Per my earlier comments, that's a lot of what I want to change. So
Yes.
Agree.
No,
we agree absolutely.
Absolutely. But to go to the taxpayers and say, hey, we want more, when we're planning a redesign yet again of the gate, where we can integrate automation, we can have remote monitoring from a security company during off-peak hours. There are things that we can do to save money and to make it work better. And before we come to the taxpayer and ask for that money, we need to do everything we can to make sure that it runs better. Right now we're just talking about the status quo on everything. Even the police, it's status quo. gate, it's status quo, we're just keeping what we have instead of talking about making it better. And that's the conversation we should be having.
Great.
I have no further comment. I do like the idea of finding out at least what the BBSA can do, you know? If we can buy some time until the 2024 election, well, okay, maybe, good. But I'm conflicted because I also do think that it should be kind of working hand in hand between the gate and the police department, and not a, you know, well, I'm not gonna answer the call because this guy ran through the gate. We don't work with you anymore. So that's an issue that is kind of mixes up the whole. But I'm perfectly willing to listen to whoever makes it.
Can I say a comment? May I comment?
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Chair.
Our rangers right now are working hand in hand with the police department. They're on the same radio waves, they're on everything. Just because you have the association managing it doesn't mean that they couldn't be in nice uniforms, they couldn't be trained appropriately, and professional employees. They could be the same employees that are there. Just put them in an appropriate uniform. I'm just saying, look at the dollars and cents. If it doesn't make sense to the community, not the district so much, if it doesn't make sense to the community, to just manage it the most effective way.
Was there discussion, and I confess I did not participate in the liaison committee meeting, was there any discussion about the cost? I mean, your implication is they would take it on at cost now. My suspicion is they're gonna raise our rates another $300 a year.
We're gonna raise the rates anyways here. Rates are going up one way or the other.
But my question is the same, was there discussion at the liaison committee
I wasn't at the meeting, I spoke
about
with Wes after.
their cost to do that?
The way I posed the question was referring to this discussion about raising gate taxes, and should those efforts fail, there's been consternation in the community about, oh my gosh, if we don't pass the gate tax, we don't increase the gate tax, we're gonna lose the gate tax. I would say with almost certainty that the BBSA, the HOA, the membership would never allow this place to not be a gated community. And it, Mr. Shryock said it behooves the BBSA to keep this a gated community, and they would do what they would need to do to keep it that way. If I'm not.
BBSA won't be capped at up to 2% or the CPI.
Right.
So if they wanna go up 20%, and that's what they do, we might find ourselves paying more for that
$1,000
gate part of our HOA dues, cause it'll get folded in there. We're gonna pay it either way. I like that we're gonna build in a cap. I like that it's gonna grow, but I like that it's capped. What if that part goes up 20% a year? Are we gonna be okay with that?
Yeah, it's really insane, cause a lot of the people right now are the oldest people that live here that are saying, I can't really afford anything going up. I've talked to so many people, and I'm no longer a licensed real estate agent, I'm just telling them, call and talk to these reverse mortgage companies if you're really in trouble. Because it's not something that you wanna get in trouble over, and now they're saying that they wanna turn it over to the HOA so they can raise it 20% a year. A small reverse mortgage can save them on the CSD raises. But if the HOA raises it, they will lose their properties for sure. I've been helping people because I have friends whose parents didn't manage their money. They get a small reverse mortgage and then their children pay it off and still keep the properties. But if it's done with the HOA, they're gonna have to reverse the whole property and it's gone.
All right, I did go back, but keep it really brief, all right, guys?
I promise, I promise. My question, I think, is to our attorney more than anyone. Should we go, I'm sorry. Judith Cagle again. My question is to all of you, should we go ahead and put the ballot, put the measure on the ballot? this year, is there anything that would keep the BBSA in 2 years from stepping in and taking over? The fact that the CSD now controls it, is there anything that would stop it from happening? In other words, do we need to not look at going ahead and putting the ballot measure on, even though we have alternatives out there? Because those alternatives exist. Or
You're
should we
asking, could
go?
it be reversed?
Huh?
You're asking, could it be reversed?
Exactly,
Or expect the BVSA to work within the budget that's been established by this ordinance.
exactly. So in other words, and then my second point would be to postpone putting the gate measurement on until another election and allow our population to only have to digest one increase.
Yeah, cause this is a big one.
This year,
That's what it's
because the
like.
gate is chunk change in comparison to the other, and we may have some alternatives for funding it or taking it over, and let the liaison committee do their work. So, two arguments, one pro, go ahead and put it on, one con, let's not do it.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Hernandez.
Well, while he's coming up, there was a question there, if you want me to answer it, that the tax is a funding mechanism, so any action on the tax does not affect whatsoever future management options, whether it's PVSA, whether it's a private company, the board can do whatever it wants. You're just establishing a funding mechanism for what's in place now.
I presume we would repeal the tax.
Yes,
I
then you
certainly
would
have no
repeal,
desire
because
for us to institute a tax.
If somebody else is
to the
doing it, you
BVSA.
wouldn't have a purpose
Yeah,
for it.
absolutely.
So you'd have to, but yes.
So two things. One is, I don't disagree that looking at options is not a good idea, and hopefully you all do as well. It's always best, and particularly as a taxpayer, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Attorney, but, you know, the CSD is enacted by legislation, so they're actually a government body, which allows them to create taxes. And that therein, makes them subject to 218, right?
Mhm.
So the BVSA is not.
Right.
So they can raise the rates however they want, they don't have to come to us for a vote. So there's a lot of things that can be discussed about that, I don't think you're gonna be able to make that decision tonight. But the one thing you can do is decide to allow us as voters to make the decision for ourselves, whether or not we wanna invest in the community again for the tax, based on those who value the gate, and leave it at that, and if they don't vote for it, they don't. Simple as that.
You say? Yep. Anything else? Ms. Krieger? Quickly. Not, you don't have to run quickly, but.
Quick comments. You don't want me to trip and fall, right?
No.
Thank you for that, President. Yeah, I was at the Liaison meeting and it was a very cordial discussion, what Mr. Jensen had relayed that was said, that they were happy to look at any way they can help us and come alongside of us if we find ourselves in the predicament of needing this. One of the things that I did like about this, and a lot of us have had concerns about paying the extra $12 RFID. I know it's just one thing, there's a lot to consider in comparisons and what. But with their amenity cards, that gate will be for every resident now, and just the slow gate that the residents that aren't paying the $12 fee would potentially not be stuck in line with everyone else. So there's plus and cons there. And the expansion of cameras there that they could have in different areas. So there's opportunity there. The other thing, you know, about chunk change, well, if you looked at the budget last year for the PD, it was $1,900. 1.9 million, sorry, it's getting late. And for the gate, it was like almost $700,000. So we still got a significant amount there to deal with. So I just wanted to make that point. And I do believe that they're going to, at the BBSA, still try to do what the residents have, even though, yes, they have much more flexibility, increase the taxes higher than we may like. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
So I think there's some merit to that discussion, and it's certainly worth having. You don't close the door on an idea without exploring it. But the gate goes hand in hand with security, and our police are our first line of defense for our safety and security here. And if the gate were outside of their control, then if there's a contention between the BVSA and the CSD, then we don't get the gate to operate the way the police want. We get it the way the homeowners association wants. What if they don't operate it to the police's satisfaction? There will be no way to fix that. They will give them control over it. And it doesn't exist today. We have a idea to fully fund our gate the way it is today, based on the facts that are today, and we can still explore the future. We can still explore options, but there was an infantile. It just talks. They just started. I don't mean they were. I'm not trying to belittle the talks. They just began, right? They're infant stages. So I still support putting this on. And if the voters don't want to vote for 2 tax increases and they pick 1, great. If they pick 0, great. But we're letting the voters decide if they want to fund our public safety or not.
Right.
Where are we on this? More discussion? Anything else to add? I think we're ready to ask for a motion here, gents.
If I may, whoever's making the motion, if the desire is to have the revised resolution and ordinance, just state that. Thank you. Yes.
You wanna take this one?
No.
I won't have to read all that again. Not that I read it in the first place.
Mr. President, I move the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 22/23-1.
-10.
10.
As revised, including the ordinance.
Okay, we'll take it really slow and you just write it down and then feed it back to us, right? Calling for an election to increase the gate operations special tax to $185 per parcel. Requesting consolidation with the statewide general election on November 8, 2022, and authorizing such other actions as may be necessary and convenient for the election of the proposed ballot measure.
Are we discussing
What's
an
missing?
escalator?
Yes.
No escalator. I wanna make it simple.
No escalator.
I would support an escalation. I don't think we serve ourselves by not.
I think we're gonna have, well, that's my motion.
Yeah. I think a motion's been made.
Can't start arguing about it, it's a motion.
I-
Anybody wanna take a second? No.
I'd make the same motion with an escalation. I don't think we serve ourselves by setting us up for future discussions like this.
Okay, what's your motion?
What's the current gate budget, or the projected gate budget for 2023? Isn't it like?
About 500, I think, is what you
I thought we saw
adopted.
700.
Yeah, so if it's in the 480 to 500,000 range, this 185 is gonna generate about 647,000 a year, so where's the overage gonna go?
To improving.
So I think the model is a little bit dated relative to the budget. So part of what it did have was the allocation, which for the ability to compare those budgets, as I've explained before, we left it in the administration. So, as I explained, this 6 1/2 does the other in terms of budget impact. So it includes the overhead.
So when it's convenient, we're gonna put the admin allocation back in the budget.
No, what I said is it's dated relative to the budget, not saying anything about convenience. I think that misconstrues it.
Excuse myself for about 2 minutes.
Okay.
And again, Mr. President, if I'm understanding procedurally, if in fact, the budget for a subsequent year based upon efficiencies and innovations were all of a sudden to only be $360,000, and we come to the board annually to certify an amount, you don't have to do this, but that is your maximum amount, so you can come back down and adjust.
I think that was Mr. Grace's motion, so I'm just gonna wait until your turn. He said he needed 2 minutes. It's all right. It's just, we're just gonna pause here for a minute. He said 2 minutes.
Been sitting here a long time.
And I'll take the opportunity, that last measure that we passed, everyone who clapped, I'm calling you out. You gotta tell 10 people to vote yes on that thing. And you gotta make sure they tell 10 people. And you gotta make sure they tell 10 people. And if they don't, you gotta tell 100. So.
I plan on it.
We gotta get this word out and get this to pass and fund our police department. Thank you very much for that.
We will.
Clapper, you gotta do it twice now.
I'm gonna be walking block after block after block. That's what I do.
All right, thank you, Mr. Grace. I'm glad you got it right. The motion was yours with well, we had a motion by Mr. Quinn without a second. Then you had a motion just like his with a 2%. You didn't say the number?
Up to.
The same, my motion will be the same as the police.
With the escalator up to.
Same terms, yes.
And these are still maximum amounts, and if the budget drops, we can set it lower. Okay, so that, does everyone understand the motion on the floor? Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Grace, second by Quinn. Roll call vote.
Director Grace?
Aye.
Director Jensen?
No.
Director Quinn?
Aye.
President Han?
Aye, motion passes 3-0. All right, same thing, tell 10 people, they gotta tell 10, or you gotta tell 100. Item F, approve the master service agreement with Everbridge Inc. for the Nixle 360 community notification platform. Chief Sells not in the hallway, is he?
No.
No, it's me and Ms. Clark,
Okay.
and I'll start, and then she can wrap. So, Mr. President, members of the board, I had asked staff, as I was aware that our existing agreement with Code Red was going to expire by the end of the year, to look at other alternatives and companies and systems that we might use. And Nixle, I think, has been mentioned in here before. And they looked at it, and effectively, it is a product that has more capabilities and use for us beyond just a emergency. So it has more applications at a cheaper cost.
That always works.
So
How can you go wrong?
we are asking to move forward with this, and we will have some overlap. So it's not going to be a situation where all of a sudden Code Red is over and we're starting something new. We're gonna have overlap, so we can get our residents signed up on a new system and let the other one fade out and then be on this. So I know there was a question raised to me about whether or not the voice can be modified from the, I don't know if you want to call it a voice, in the Code Red. So yes, the answer to that was yes, we can. I know Megan and Chief Suttles had been engaged with those folks. So if there's any other questions that you want to ask about its capabilities, she'll answer those.
All right, thank you. Do you have anything to say, or do you want to just be ready for questions?
I am ready.
Public questions for Nixle, please, Ms. Cooper.
Does Nixle allow it to notify anybody with their cell phones that are in the valley at the time?
Yes.
Because there's a new, yeah, that's good. Thank you.
I've actually been on
Nixle. We'll go in order. Ms. Knapp.
Real quick, Greg Matheson, Chair of DPAC. I haven't talked about this with the group, but I'm aware, use both Nixle and Code Red. Nixle back where I used to live, where my family is. and Code Red up here. Personally, I like the name Code Red better, but I'm very happy with both of them. And Nixle, I like their notifications, and everything that I've dealt with them has been very good. So if it meets up to everything you guys are talking about and is cheaper, sounds great.
Thank you, Mr. Matheson. I appreciate your opinion, especially being the hard work you've done on the DPAC. So thank you for that. Yes, Ms. Sally.
I have been using Nixle for over 15 years in my old neighborhood, and I also am a member of Nixle in my daughter's neighborhood. So I'm able to keep track of what's going on with everybody in both neighborhoods because I still own a home in my old neighborhood, and I'm also able to keep track of what's happening for my daughter because she's not home when she's working. So if the area she lives in catches fire, I can let her know because she doesn't really like to pay attention to her phone during the day. So I highly recommend Nixle. I get so many fraudulent or wrong things with Code Red because other communities with similar zip codes, I get their stuff. But I don't get that ever with Nixle, so we're gonna be doing good.
All right, thank you. More public comment on Nixle?
I have an 818 area code, that's why I get wrong stuff with Code
Any more
Red.
public comment on Nixle? All right, directors, Mr. Grace.
Do we need to close the public
I
comment?
don't think that was a public hearing.
Okay.
No, this is just a regular old,
Regular old
item,
hearing.
yeah.
Okay, my one comment to Bill, was that Joshua from War Games needs to go. It's been one of the biggest annoyances of mine since I moved here, is that ridiculous 1978 robot voice. Some people may find it quaint, I don't find it quaint at all. My only comment would be, I would recommend, again, how do we follow up on this? I did talk to Carol. If it's the board's pleasure, I would be more than happy to work with Carol and Megan to choose a assertive yet soothing voice that is in the 21st century. If not, we can have voice samples, I suppose, brought to the board if we want to get that detail, but this is, I'm not trying to make light, this is something that is, I'm passionate about, so. Anyway, please don't laugh at me, Mr. Johnson.
Floor is yours.
Nixle's a great platform. It's used by most of the communities around us. I've spoken to Mr. Mallon about it. I don't know why we didn't use it in the first place, but that wasn't his decision. It's customizable, so you can get like the most trivial of notifications in the world, or you can just get the really important stuff, or you can get them in different ways, and it's a much better system, so I'm all for it.
I have nothing.
I like the idea of the overlap, that's great. Nixle's awesome. Let's go for it. What do you think, board?
That's great, let's do it.
I move the Board of Directors approve the master service agreement with Everbridge, Inc. for the Nixle 360 community notification platform.
Second.
Motion by Jensen, second by Grace, roll call vote.
Director Grace?
Aye.
Director Jensen?
Aye.
Director Quinn?
Aye.
President Han?
Aye, motion carries 4-0, and our last action item, don't go anywhere after that because there's still a lot to come. Next action item is G, cancel August 11th, 22 regular board meeting, Mr. Mallon.
Mr. President, members of the board, again, we have some conflicts with our ability to attend that meeting, and the board has for the last 3 years now, canceled the August meeting and allowed all of the board members and staff that come to be able to work around what otherwise is mandatory attendance. So we recommend again canceling the August meeting.
I think we had enough tonight for 2 meetings anyway. Any public comment on this? Board? Motion?
Mr. President, I move the Board of Directors cancel the August 11th, 2022 regular board meeting.
Second.
Motion by Grace, second by Quinn. Roll call vote.
Director Grace?
Aye.
Director Jensen?
Aye.
Director Quinn?
Aye.
President Han?
Aye, motion carries 4-0. Item 12, information and discussion, board comments, Director Grace.
Okay, so everybody's high-fiving and really thrilled that we got the police item on the ballot. So here's where I get snarky and hold the community accountable. The tenor on social media on this item has been gross. It has been disgusting. And the other thing that's important to clarify is like I say, I got about 30 emails, and they're all obviously in favor of the motion tonight. And the one thing almost universally they said is, those people who don't want our police, they're lying and they're berating us and they're just acting out of order. And ladies and gentlemen, that is absolutely not true. Not true that they're not that they're doing it. It's not true that they're the only ones doing it. Some of the biggest lies, some of the biggest propaganda, some of the smarmiest toddler-like behavior I've seen in the last 3 weeks has come from the people holding these signs. And at the same time, they stand in here and talk about civility and working together. And I counsel you folks, if you want these measures passed, please do not go out there and spread misinformation and lie about the issues. And it just, you can tell I'm worked up about it. It's just not who we are, and it's not our very best. And please don't nod your head, Ms. Stratland.
It's Statland, not Stratland.
Stratland. Please don't nod your head. I'm
I am
directing
nodding
these
it
kind
for
of
a
comments
reason.
at you personally and others in this room.
You can look at me.
I am absolutely looking at you.
Well, when our board of director Jensen
Lies.
stops.
Stop, everybody stop,
So,
we're not
I'm
going
saying-
there here.
This is not a public
We're
hearing.
not going there here.
Well, if
Please
he's gonna
stop.
chastise
Please
us,
stop.
then we have a right to speak
Actually,
up.
this is Director Gracie's board comments, okay? This
But
doesn't
it's
get-
not okay for
Stop.
him to tell
Stop.
us that we're inappropriate
Stop.
and we can't answer.
Yes, it is, stop, it's his comments.
I am cautioning you, if you want credibility in this community and you want people to believe you, take my word for it, you need to not lie, and you need to not spread misinformation, you need to not cut other people down.
And I didn't lie
Stop.
about you, I explained to
You
you what
have one more
happened.
chance and you're leaving.
Then I'll post on social media when
You
I really
certainly
feel.
will.
Good night, I'll go post
Greg,
it.
you're out of order.
I'll go post it,
This
cause
is-
you're starting
You're
a
out of
lie.
order, Ms. Statland.
I wrote to you
You're
and I
out of order, Ms.
explained what
Statland.
happened.
You're out of order,
I
Ms.
researched
Statland.
and I found your
You're
words
out of
and I
order, Ms.
told
Statland.
everybody the truth.
Who did
You're
you tell
out
the truth?
of
I
order.
sent 200
You are
copies.
out of
I
order.
spent 200
You are
copies
out
of your
of
message
order.
from the campaign
You are out
to prove who
of
lied about you.
order. Good night.
So I'll go post the truth again.
Good night.
I won't be lied
Good
about
night.
because of Jensen.
Mr. President, I told
night.
you they weren't gonna like it.
I'm not lying. Jensen's a liar.
Good night. Director Grace, your floor is still yours.
The refrain of people who spread falsehoods is I'm not a liar. In any event, that's really all I had to say. Again, if you want credibility in this community, if you want people to believe you, if you want to get these motions passed as you're out there, as Mr. Hernandez said, pounding the pavement, please do it with integrity. You're all better than this. You're all better than this. And another thing I would say is, I don't care what your feelings are about an individual. Elected officials, we deserve some measure of respect. We sit up here and we make the hard decisions, and again, that's really the end of my rant. But it's just gross, and it needs to change on both sides.
Thank you.
Board comments, Director Jensen.
I echo your concerns, by
Thank
the
you.
way. But at the same time, you know, when we go into an endeavor like this, God help us, I hope we have thick skins, because you need one, and
No question.
You can't survive doing a job like this. I was in law enforcement for 25 years. I've been called so much worse on the side of the road. You can go onto YouTube and you'll find a video of me and a trucker with 3 million views, and the comments are just ghastly. I mean, so it is what it is. That's it.
Director Quinn, board comments.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have some comments. I wish this, we had had time to get to this a little bit earlier in the evening and it would have more kick. But some folks have had the temerity to call me an old man. Looking around the room, I can see some truth in that. The aging can vary greatly by attitude. Like the song said, I'm as good once as I ever was. More than half my years have had a BVS connection, from property owner to homeowner to full-time resident, and many of them in service to the community. My commitment here is total. We do not expect to live anywhere else. There was a time in the mid-2000s when I believed the BVPD was not needed. Crime was low, population was growing slowly, and so forth. But I grew up gaining greater knowledge of the valley, and in the last half decade, seeing what's happening outside the valley. Nationally, defunding the police has earned for itself a very bad reputation. The notion that the cancer associated with it could never come here is tragically naive. Alternatively, maybe that's just the point. I don't trust anyone who's okay with no police and or no gate. The establishment in Sacramento and Washington would love to see us all living tightly in the cities, riding buses and trains to get around and live in the countryside free of human habitation. And if they cannot move us to the city, to try to move the city to us. And I say no thank you to that. As long as we've been here, the police and gate have been a part of the community. Bear Valley is not what it is without the PD and the gate. This November's election will determine perhaps conclusively whether there's a mandate for defunding the police and gate. I'm profoundly grateful for having found BVS, for being able to stay here, and for being allowed to help out in my own small way. This is not a moment for casual involvement. Therefore, I announce my candidacy for re-election. My website is quinn4bvcsd.org. And I say, invite the support of all those of goodwill. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Quinn. No comments from President Hahn, staff reports, department heads, finance. Is that you?
No, Mr.
No?
President,
Okay.
members of the board, our reports are in your packet, and we'll stand for any questions if you have them.
Public, board, Public Works.
Mr. President, members of the board, our report is in your packet.
Public, board, Public Safety.
Mr. President, I don't think we did have the report, and we didn't have the opportunity to get some of our materials in there, so actually.
We're gonna do a consolidated multi-month report, the next time we meet.
3 months. 3-month report on police. All right, Public, Board, General Counsel.
Thank you, Mr. President. A lot of good work tonight on some challenging issues, and I think because of the tax measures and doing some adjustments on the fly, so to speak, what I would like to do is I will go back and make the revisions as directed. I'll run it by the board though, because we have a very short window to get those into the county, and I want to make sure that, you know, what we do is exactly what you understood us to do. So we'll get those out to you next week and get some feedback, and hopefully that is what you approved. Okay, so if you're okay with that, and that would be my preference. Thank you, that's all I have.
Public, Board, General Manager report.
I will try to be brief, Mr. President, members of the board. First item, just update on the tree grant project. And as everyone knows, we have the trees at the wastewater plant. The intent then is to have them chipped up. The first effort created too much dust. The logger is going to get a bigger, better machine and use some watering techniques to keep dust from occurring. And just the nature of the machine is it's a tub grinder as opposed to the other type. It should help. So that is the plan. And so the folks know it hopefully will take no more than 5 days. The estimate is 3 to 5. So they should be making some really great progress. We recognize there's some inconvenience, it will have noise, but it'll be only from an 8 to 5 type, schedule. And the alternatives were, hauling out logs, and that was expensive. We hope to be able to utilize all of the chips between us at our facilities, starting with the wastewater plant, and then with the BDSA. If we still have some, and this is not a list that we have started nor intend to start yet. We initially had thought it'd be nice to be able to share these and let people use them. We're not there yet, so we'll get started and we'll see. And if we have them extra, great, but that is just the update on the plan. Again, we don't have yet the agreement from the state for phase 2. Phase 2 was really kind of the same geographic area of Bear Mountain, and just continuing to do the work. Some parcels we weren't able to get to in the initial boundaries. So we'll be continuing on that, and I'll leave it there for now. Next item, I want to praise the Bear Valley Gardening Club. They have been volunteering their time in our Waterwise garden out here in front of the CSD office building, and it just brought in so much talent and enthusiasm, and the effort shows because they really snapped it up. And we will be working with them. They've submitted some initial items of plans for what they'd like to do. So if you think the species placard is a little worn and sun, we're gonna work with them. We're gonna fix this thing up and again bring it back to some really fine level for the residents to see as an example. So kudos to them and just a public thank you. Auction, we just closed on auction for some of the PD things. There's street signs out there, so again, people, please bid high and often, and that generates funds that again help us accelerate the replacement of the street sign program, and that's really what we've been doing. The police stuff is new. The board had declared it surplus, so if you go to govdeals.com, you can see what's there, and I think we'll be putting some more stuff on there. Make an awareness, there are a few spots on Bear Valley Road that need some attention, and so our residents may experience a little inconvenience as our road crew goes out there on some spots to fix them up. We are not reconstructing, we are not digging down, we're just gonna try and level out the unevenness of some spots that obviously have sunk or worn, and we're still obviously working on that. But in the meantime, we wanna make sure it's all safe, so they may see that. On the, let's say, water, wells 31 and 32, we've had some electrical issues, SCADA issues, but talking with Mr. Parks, we can get those, and I've asked him to please start putting that water into our system. So that is a significant project to finally get done, and to be a little more, maybe a lot more self-sufficient in our water, and it actually will save us money from importing through Cummings Valley. I did mention earlier about the water system RFP, and we're still trying to find someone who might do that for us. Our well rehabilitation program for the Mid-Valley wells, we've got 5 that we've been working on. And we kind of broke it up a little bit. We were looking to do one large contract, but we also consulted with Provost and Pritchard, some water engineers, and they suggested we do the video of them all first with one vendor. And so we've gotten that part done, and the beauty of that, I think, is any of the contractors can use those same videos. And so we've kind of expedited things and breaking it up a little bit, which I don't know that we've made any decisions on it beyond what the board has approved to move forward. But the potential is we just maybe do each, they're just individual, we bid them out one at a time, as opposed to the package, which we hoped would get us some economies of scale on some of the pricings and things, so. And then lastly, another shout out. So Caleb Hansen and Nash Franco are a couple of our employees in the water department. And I remember when Caleb got his first certificate here about 2 years ago, I think. He has completed the testing to be certified as a distribution grade 3. And Nash is now distribution grade 2. So example of our employees continuing their careers, their certifications, that brings greater expertise and capabilities to our team, and maybe almost not to diminish the individual accomplishments, because those guys have to do the studying and do the work and pass the test. But the water department, Mr. Parks informs me, for his first time recollection, has all of our employees certified, which is, you know, when we talk about cross-training and we talk about the ability to move around, that he says that's the first. So I wanted to share that because it's indicative of those employees and that department now as well, that they've all gotten their certifications. So I wanted to end on that high note, and I will. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm still stuck on your first statement. I'll try to be brief. Sorry, just teasing.
I thought I was.
You were. I did meet 2 members of the garden club. They were working on the water ice garden after our one-on-one. They're really nice people, and I certainly support the CSD giving them some funding that they need to update that small garden. Add the hauling of the logs would also hurt our roads, so it's better to deal with them where they are. Public, General Council Board. Right. Future agenda items. Do we have? I think we have something.
We had one from Director Grace, but it's escaping me at the moment.
But there's a 90-day part.
90 days.
Should we put that on a future agenda for 90 days to revisit the COLAs? It's in a motion.
It was the motion having to do with the gate.
The gate operations.
Yeah, gate operations. You know, I talked to Carol during the break, and she and I are gonna sit down. I think I'm comfortable working with her to get what we need, and get as Mr. Jensen said, get the conversation started about making things better. So I don't know that we need a motion for that.
Okay, just put that on the future agenda. Should we put the 90-day revisit of COLA on future agenda?
Okay.
And let's make sure we don't let it drop. That'll come up in 90 days. Anything else? Ladies and gentlemen, in record time.
Wait, one more minute and we'll hit 10 o'clock.
No, we're gonna do 59. 21:59. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your participation.